time of year? I don't know.
Nah.
Nah, just a skill issue. Let
Maybe a little bit of luck too.
me test the audio.
So
Yeah, seems good. Yeah, we really got our audio good, you know.
it only took a dozen episodes.
Did you watch the chess world championship? I forget if we talked about it.
I watched the last 5 moves of the game between Ding and Nepo.
Of the last game,
Thought so, yeah.
the
A
tiebreak,
like
like
brilliant move that Ding saw that no one else
when
saw.
he blocked the king with the rook, and they continued the game when Nepo was trying to draw it, or it might have been a different brilliant move.
I thought it was Ding found a win when it was looking like it was going to be a draw.
Oh, well, yeah, we probably are talking about the same thing, but the brilliant move was cool because it also like wasn't even like a winning move immediately. It just kept the game going, and then Nepo like crumbled a few moves later. So if we're talking about the same one, it was even just the fact that he was willing to play on when he could have drawn and go into a tiebreak. But it was very exciting. That's for sure.
I definitely didn't understand what I had watched.
I was watching with commentary too, so they were like, "There's no way he's about to play Rook G6 or something," and then he played it immediately, and my jaw dropped. It was really cool.
Why was it such an amazing move? Because it forced it to keep.
So you know how they can repeat moves to do a draw. So Nepo's starting to repeat, and it is an equal position, but it's equal in a way that could be like something could happen, but it's still equal. So they're about to go into tie breaks. No, they're already in tie breaks. They're about to go into double tie breaks to blitz instead of rapid, like 25-minute games. They're about to go into 5-minute games, and Nepo does have the advantage in blitz a little bit, but Ding is probably not thinking about that. Just thinking like, I have a slight chance here. So he, instead of repeating, he shocks Nepo, and you can even see a clip in Nepo's face. He was like, "Oh my gosh!" And he shocks him because he, instead of repeating moves, he just blocks his king with his own rook, meaning his rook was pinned now to the king because he was blocking like a queen or something. And then that made the game play on, and then like Nepo made like two inaccurate moves, and suddenly Ding found the perfect continuations, and now the position was not equal at all, and it was there was quite an end to a 14 game match plus tie breaks. Yeah, it was wild. Yeah,
14 games? Is
yeah,
that
14
14?
games, and it was equal at the end of those 14 games with a bunch of wins on each side, which was very cool. Yeah,
How long do they have for each game?
they both started with like something like 2 hours, and then they got some added time at move 40 and maybe move 60.
Hmm.
Yeah, so some of the games went like 5-6 hours.
How long do like the first 10 moves take usually?
That could be really quick in some of the games. Other times it'll be, yeah, a full hour, 2 hours. Yeah, it depends. It's rare for the first 10 moves to be really slow, but every now and then there's definitely games where the first 10 moves are like uh, over an hour or 2 hours. But sometimes it was like 5 minutes. Yeah.
It's interesting that I didn't come up with this idea. Maybe did you? I don't remember where I heard it.
Yeah.
But we humans are not the best chess players, but we still watch humans play chess. No one's out there watching uh, the best chess engines play each other.
It's a good point.
Why? We're not interested in the best chess. We're interested in the best chess by humans. And I guess there's some of that like ingenuity and variability and chance that kind of excites us. There's something boring about the best clinically speaking.
It's a very good point. Yeah. I don't yeah, I think that's a really good point. I mean, some people do watch computer chess, and I have gone through phases where I watch it more, but you have to be like really into chess to watch that. And it's not like I guess it's interesting, but yeah, they're not doing commentary. I don't think I've ever seen a production of the computer chess sort of tournaments where there's commentary. You can't talk about the players like body language. People clearly enjoy the human side of chess, and when you look at these chats, these live chats, it's a lot of identifying with the players or not identifying with the players. But yeah, it is a very good point that we don't just want to see technical skill; we want the story of the experience in a big way.
So I think this leads us into our first topic, which
Nice.
is content creators being displaced by generative AI.
Yeah.
Do we think that artists, musicians, OnlyFans content creators will all be displaced by generative AI because it will be cheaper, more unlimited with the possibilities of what can be created, faster, more personalized than what can be done by human artists? Or will people always want the human done thing that's
Hmm.
more unique in some way?
Can I ask what you think? Or, because I could tell you what I think. I'm just curious.
Yeah, I think humans are going to be um, I don't know. Like, I guess I'm an anti-humanist, if that's the right way to say it.
In that you
Yeah,
don't.
I think that.
Is this
Yeah,
about your
I think
prediction
we
or
can.
what you think would be good?
This is not a values judgment. This is just a
Okay.
prediction.
Well, then I
Yeah,
don't
I
think
don't.
that makes you an anti-humanist if it's not like what you
Okay,
think is
fair enough.
good.
Fair
But yeah,
enough. But
yeah.
maybe I also am. Yeah, I
Maybe
think
you
that we
also.
don't stand a chance. I think
I think
it's
yeah.
we choose convenience and cheap time and time again. Revealed preferences show that human beings will choose what's cheapest and easiest. And I
Sure.
think that generative AI paves the way for that. I don't think that someone's going to want to pay a struggling Brooklyn artist for a painting when they can get it faster and cheaper from a generative AI, with the exception of maybe a few very wealthy people who are looking for they want like endangered species because they like the taste of something that's a little dangerous. But most people are out there eating chicken from Purdue.
And there's lots of people already who are clearly very satisfied with, non-human made art. You mentioned porn as well. That's definitely a thing as well. I mean, yeah, there's certainly just AI porn, and there has been, robot porn for probably decades already. And like, robot sex toys and stuff like that. Um, I think, as far as art itself, like, there's a huge place for it for sure to appreciate AI art. And I don't, if I had the technical means, yeah, it'd be cool to get like a huge print of some, of some AI art. And, I guess it wouldn't be that hard to do if it went through the effort. Um, and you could get it printed on a canvas. You could make it look like a painting. It could look perfectly like a painting. I don't think that people like art just for the stimulus of it, though.
Interesting.
Yeah. I mean, I think that it's very valid, and I've literally spent hours making AI visual art, like many, many hours, and I have saved a lot of the images. And they're super, super cool. And so, but for me, that was like an experimental thing. And I still sort of felt like I was playing a role in making them, even though I was just putting in terms. But um, as far as like how much, so what I guess I wonder like what does that future look like if you know there are. I guess that's just how things work. There's less opportunities for people as time goes by in certain industries. And I just wonder what are those people going to do who can make less of a living? You know, not even just painters where it's already extremely hard to make a living, but like stuff where it's actually a good living nowadays. Like mixing sound for an album, and now that's been done by AI and will be more and more sound mixing, mastering. So there's a lot of things where it's like you can not easily, but you can kind of make a good living now. In a not a super rare way, and you won't be able to. So I just wonder, like, yeah, how that will work. What will those people do? Um, it just gets more and more interesting as technology advances, and this is a big technological advancement. I agree with what you were saying. I forget if it was before we started streaming about
It was.
yeah, copyright not being up to date. That's very like I've noticed that too in stuff I've looked into, and like specifically, I think the U.S. copyright laws like have very little. They haven't really incorporated AI in any way, and I think right now the law is such that you can't copyright something that was created by AI.
I
But
think you're right.
yeah, and maybe it's owned by it's sort of like it's owned by the company that makes the AI, but even that I think is a little bit tenuous, and it's not clear whether it should be.
There's an interesting parallel to draw. So when an artist makes a drawing, where did they get the information to make that drawing?
I mean, their past experience, I guess. Yeah.
I
Yeah.
would say so
Yeah.
too, which presumably took inspiration from other
Sure.
people,
Yeah.
other drawings they've seen, the world they've experienced, their own life experiences, and they kind of jam all that stuff together, and out pops this painting. It's an
Yeah.
oversimplification,
Yeah.
but it's basically what happens.
Yeah.
Arguably, the same thing is happening from AI. They're just better at amassing data from a wide variety of different experiences that are out there on the internet, but they're still aggregating that information and making something novel. I don't see any truly like intellectually honest distinction between those two things. Yeah, AI is just better at it.
Right. And so you're saying that like the but as far as the copyright, does that mean like if they're able to do it so perfectly,
Yeah,
like how does that like you could train an AI on Beatles songs and it could write a song that
absolutely.
would be so you would it would if a human wrote it, it would be copyright infringement. Like so that has to still be copyright infringement if an AI does it.
I think that it makes the concept of copyright infringement totally moot. So what are you copywriting? The sound? I don't think you can do that.
No, it would. Yeah, that's a good question. I guess it would either be lyrics or specific chord progressions if it's extended enough. I think that could be copyright infringement. Certain melodic lines, if they're specific enough, I think could be. And like to be clear, I'm not a huge. I'm not like a defender of copyright. I don't.
I understand.
Yeah. Um, but it just raises a lot of interesting questions, and the law does need to adapt. I don't know even how I want the law to adapt. I don't know that I want companies to be able to copyright all these things that they make
You
anyway.
don't.
Yeah.
Think about, so like first mover in the space. If someone could have a generative AI and presumably the hardware to store all this information on, they could potentially just generate every
Right.
configuration of every possible
Yeah.
drawing and song, and now it's theirs. And
Yeah.
you go and make something, and they're like, "Oh, wait, we made that."
Exactly.
That's not a good system.
Yeah.
I don't think this is what I'm saying. I think AI breaks the mold of you creating content, meaning that you own that content.
Yeah.
I just don't think it makes sense in a post-generative AI world.
Yeah, I think that's true. Like I see it that way too. And there's some fancy word for that too. I remember reading about like that the problem of blank, like that what you just described. I forget what the fancy term is. But yeah, like that's a huge issue. And yeah, and literally company like some of these software, they can make millions and millions of songs in a day
Hmm.
or millions and millions of pieces in a day,
Yeah,
whatever it is. Um and so yeah, I guess like when they do that, how should we like we don't want to give copyright ownership. So okay, it's no copyright ownership. Still, how do we want to treat that? I mentioned like should I don't know, like people should have the right to listen to and enjoy AI art as much as they want to, and it should obviously be available as much as people want. But yeah, how do you make it available without that like difference in production being a huge factor that changes the experience either of using some platform or
yeah.
yeah
Well,
um
you socialize it, of course. That
yeah
also gets at your question of what do we do with these people who are going to lose gainful employment from it. And
yeah
perhaps this is a good segue into
yeah
Capital.
what are you saying or what do you mean like
I said socialize it, meaning
yeah
like uh, the state would take all of this as their own, and the people will own it instead of any one individual or a company. And I say that slightly tongue in
I
cheek
wasn't
because
sure yeah
we're planning on talking
yeah
about
yeah yeah
um, economic and political structures anyway. Slightly tongue in cheek. I don't know. I don't have a good
well
solution. I
no
really don't know how to answer that
for sure
question.
for sure but yeah if like I mean I do think the argument for like what's the difference between a computer doing the same process that a human does but better is like I mean it's sort of like well why shouldn't we let like a submarine swim in the race like I don't I mean it's like they're doing the same thing but it's to such a different extent that it does feel like it makes it a different thing If I was able to look at a Picasso painting and replicate it like almost perfectly, that it would be there would be a, like I wouldn't selling that would become a problem, I feel like. I don't
Called a
know.
cover, isn't it?
Say what?
It's called a cover
It's called a
when
cover
you
for sure.
replicate someone else.
It's called a cover, but if I'm inspired by Picasso when I paint something, it's not called a cover. And what's the difference there is my quality of my skill. And so
Yeah, it's a really good point. How good are you at replicating that thing?
so if something is so good at replicating it that it's not only a cover but like even better than a cover, I just think what you're pointing at shows how like quantitative changes can at a certain point be like qualitative
Yeah.
change. Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. If you draw certain things out all the way to the extreme, yeah, absolutely. But this
Yeah.
is, I love technology that forces us to think differently, that breaks the previous paradigm.
Yeah.
And this is, I think, one of them.
I love it too. I just think, you always like I know you're pretty cynical and there's a lot of things I'm cynical about too, but it's like with you have to assume there's always some better and worse ways to incorporate new technology into our societies, and you have to think like we can try to do the less harmful ways, we can try to incorporate these technologies and do as minimal harm as possible. I don't think that's everybody's goal, but like that would be that's how I have to think about this stuff. It's like, yeah, this is amazing technology. It could wreak horrible havoc, or it could wreak slightly less havoc, and we could try to go that route. But yeah, I don't have a lot of confidence in that.
I think my definition of havoc might be different than yours. You said not everyone agrees on that. I do genuinely. I know this is a very out there fringe opinion, but I do believe that we are to AI as the Neanderthal was to humans. I really think that we are just a stepping stone in evolution, and silicone-based life will completely overtake humanity in short order.
I guess even if that's true, that wouldn't change like how I think things should be done or anything, because I still wouldn't think that we should like speed that along or anything like that. I can't
Why
argue.
not?
Yeah, I can't
Why not?
argue with it though. I mean, it's like it's entirely possible. I do think there's an aspect of people who we do want the human side of things, just like you mentioned with chess, and I think that would go for a lot of things. But there are limits to that. Obviously, we want convenience and stuff in our life as well.
But why not? Why not accelerate it? If you recognize that that's a possibility or even a probability, why not accelerate it?
Well, if accelerating it caused more good and but it sounds like accelerating into that is making people's life like either difficult or less meaningful or something. But
We've talked about this before. Is it like, what is your goal? Is it minimizing suffering, like minimize aggregate suffering? Everyone has their own idea of what we should be optimizing for.
that's mine.
I
I because I
yeah,
don't see,
minimize.
yeah, I don't see how else anything could be motivated. I mean, like
Over what time horizon? Minimize human suffering over over the
over
next like month, or over cumulative like lives lived?
um so does that matter? I'm trying to think how
Of course
that
it matters.
so
Yeah, absolutely.
if you're like, okay, this is the way things are going and I want to minimize stuff. It's over each time span that we have a decision, whenever you have a decision, whatever time span that affects. I mean, you might be changing your time span for different decisions of like how you're, I don't know, I guess how what harm you're taking into account. But I can't fully grasp why that would matter. Maybe you could help me understand like why it matters the time
The
scale.
time horizon. So if I
Yeah.
said, I'll just take it to the extreme to try to illustrate my point. But if you said your goal for humanity is just to minimize human suffering for the next hour,
Oh, I see what you're saying.
you would give out fentanyl to everyone and be like, hell yeah, this is fantastic.
Yeah.
This is the best hour ever. But if you say your time horizon's 1,000 years, you might make some really hard decisions that are going to cause a lot of short and medium term human suffering.
Yeah.
Because over the 1,000 years, you're going to largely propagate prosperity and change and whatnot.
Right.
So I think it matters.
It does. I see what you're saying. And this isn't like a perfect response. I'm not trying to be Weasley, but It's sort of, I do try to, I think the way I think about it, it does try to take into account multiple timescales. Like that's the ideal. Not that it's possible to always be thinking about everything, but the ideal, like the way I think about, and this obviously pertains to what we were talking about with like how much do you push certain tech advancement if it causes disruption and stuff like that. You would have to, you do your best to do like internal calculus of like how much good would it do to push this forward in this area versus how much bad does it do. It displaces certain people and so on like that. I think this math is inherently impossible to do, and I think that's something I I don't know that I probably we agree on in some way. It's just
It's
how to
maybe impossible for us to do, but maybe not for
maybe not
artificial
for AI,
intelligence.
but would I trust AI to do that because it would have to be programmed to
A specific function
have some
or
basis
goal.
of what quality means or what yeah but
Absolutely.
but
This is
yeah
maybe not existential, maybe is, but like this is a philosophical question
yeah
of when we program AI and tell it what it's optimizing for, what do we say? We don't want to say money. We don't want to say lifespan.
yeah
It's a difficult question because, truthfully, we don't know. We don't know what we're optimizing for. If you ask us at any given instant, we may tell you something that sounds good or something that we think, but in reality, if we push you on that answer, there's actually a lot of different things that are motivating you, and in different quantities at all times of the day. There's a portion of you that's looking
sure
for some aspect of fulfillment. Some of you's looking for dopamine rushes. Some of you's looking for procreation. Like there's all of these different competing objectives, and writing that for a program, defining it clearly, I think is a task we're not ready for.
that's a really really well said yeah and we'll always kind of shape it in one direction lean it in one direction or I feel like you're describing what it basically means to be human sort of to have those competing objectives to be inconsistent in how we like pursue different things and to always be pulled in different directions um but yeah, I mean, I think you could look at tech advancements and say that have already happened, and say, yeah, with even just like with those, we want to bring about as much of the good of them without taking without increasing the negative aspects too much. But obviously, that's easier said than done, and everyone has their own priorities, and we're not all on the same page of what that would look like. But
I wasn't prepared to show people, but maybe just because we're on the topic, generative AI giving a quick preview would be pretty neat.
oh
I'm
yeah,
not prepared to show mine. I don't know if you're able to show your screen
oh what do
to
you
make
mean?
your
Yeah, I think
just to
whoever
give people some basis,
yeah.
especially if they haven't played with it. Like, what are we talking about here?
Yeah,
Um,
please. You can share your screen. Is that what you were saying? You want to share your screen?
I think I do. I'm trying not to dox myself.
Yeah. Take your time, and I can actually hear. I can let me turn that off for a second. So now the screen is black on the live stream. So go ahead and take your time, and you can pull it up, um, and you can make sure that
think I
it's how you
can.
want it to. Um, right now the screen is just black, and I'm just narrating. Hello,
Yes,
hello.
I think you get the whole thing, don't you?
Um,
Yeah.
yeah, there might be a way to do part of it.
I could do. Bear with us. Stream settings, change
Yeah,
windows,
let's.
maybe. I doubt it. So I
I
could
think
do
that will do it
this,
actually. No?
green one, and then. So you're still seeing the same screen, right?
Yeah, I see your whole Discord, and now I see your desktop too. Yeah.
So what if we did a little?
Okay, that should do it. Here, I can. Yeah, this toolbar is all good and everything like that.
Cool.
Okay, cool. I'm gonna pull this up on stream. Here it is. Okay, we are now showing.
Awesome.
We are now showing it. Yeah. So you've made these images in Midjourney.
No, this is a live feed of people in the Midjourney Discord, which is where you go to use it.
Okay.
Live. So this, I guess you can't see timestamps because I have that cut off. It's just
Yeah,
barely
that's all
hidden
good.
there.
Yeah.
But people are in real time prompting Midjourney with text. So they'll say something like gift box in cerulean blue and white on white background,
Hmm.
and then Midjourney creates 4 different images for them to choose from. And then they can choose to drill down on one of the images and ask for variants on it, or to make it, I think, upgrade, or there's a different word for it.
Yeah.
Something like that. And yeah, you can prompt it to make all these different things. And so I'll scroll through so we can look at a few of them together.
Say what they are. Like, what's that circular one?
The pink one.
Yeah. Like, what's the prompt for that one?
Wide angle high res photo, Wes Anderson style scene in space, whimsical pastel.
God damn, they really nailed it. That's crazy.
Amazing.
Yeah.
I don't know who Wes Anderson is, but I feel like
you don't know Wes Anderson? Yeah, the Royal Tenenbaums movie and those types of movies.
I have no idea.
Oh yeah, he's a director. Does quirky movies.
Okay. Well, there you go. So they liked image number 3, and so they can then ask for variations on that, or like, prompt it to be iterative. And
Midjourney is okay with that. They say, okay, I'll do that. One sec.
You got it. Wow. Yeah, it's super, super fast. There's a free version. You get like 25 images, and then they cut you off, or you can pay a monthly fee.
Yeah, I have like a bunch of friends who pay for this.
Presumably, they have a very, at least in their own words, a very generous commercial use policy. So if you did want to have them make you like logos or stuff for your enterprise, they would be good with that.
I'd be really worried about that, just long term. Like, do you know, like, I wonder how that works. Like, do you have confidence that they never change their policy, and they grant you perpetuity rights of this? I don't know.
Courts. Dude, check this out. I don't even know this word. Madhubani painting of a Maharashtrian mother in Maharashtrian traditional dress, smiling at her 3 young sons and one young daughter near a village well with green trees around her. 8K. It's not perfect. I see only 2 kids there, and I don't see a well, but presumably it got that style right. I don't know.
Yeah, I mean, presumably, indeed.
I would need to check.
Yeah,
yeah.
No, I mean, I'm sure it did. I'm sure it got the style right. Yeah, that's amazing. I mean, I don't know though.
Trump in line at a prison cafeteria in an orange jumpsuit.
That's amazing.
Yeah.
Do you think there is like people get sick of this stuff though? Like, have you ever gotten sick of it or no?
I mean, the novelty wore off a little bit,
yeah.
But in terms of like, would this be a complete replacement for human-generated drawings? Yeah, absolutely. We don't have we're equipped with visual receptors. That's it. Like, we're not making some sort of judgment on anything else. You can definitely fool us with this. What I'm most excited for is not still pictures, but motion pictures. And I can stop sharing my screen.
Okay, whatever. Yeah, I mean, there's definitely that stuff too. Obviously, you see, they call it like deep fakes, or you've seen all different ones. You saw probably the Trump, Obama videos, or they're all different ones. People.
Yeah, I have seen that stuff. I meant more like, it's interesting that people go to like news and politics. I totally think about that too. But also like cinematic experiences can be totally changed. So like, instead of you watch the film as it was filmed from like 4 different camera angles, it was a 3D rendered cinematic universe, and you as the viewer could kind of explore it in 3D space and be like, Harry Potter, right? Like, you're going through Harry Potter, you're like, I actually want to watch them go into this forest from Ron's perspective.
Oh,
so
yeah.
just kind of shift to there. Or like, AI, generate me Harry Potter and the Chamber of Secrets from the perspective of Mrs. Norris, Filch's cat. Like, the possibilities for that are endless. And frankly, the fact that you could prompt AI, presumably in the future, to make you a personalized movie is amazing.
Yeah,
I could
for sure.
say to my wife, like, hey, what do you want to watch tonight? It's like, let's watch a movie about space exploration on Titan in the style of Quentin Tarantino, starring this person. It's like, holy shit, I can't wait.
It's really, really cool to think about.
Yeah.
It really is. And yeah, you can, I mean, there already is that to some extent with these images. And does that exist for videos much yet? It must.
I don't think, not in any
Not in,
commercial way or scalable way, but it
yeah.
will, right? Because as you can see, as I just demonstrated, like the technology is there. I feel like the big step change has already been made, and now it's going to be a matter of refining it and making the computing power, or building the computing power to make movies and stuff like this that are millions or billions of images stitched together.
Yeah, totally. Yeah, there's like big leaps and then there's smaller steps, I feel like.
I
Yeah.
I would recommend play around with this a little bit if you haven't, and
Yeah.
like try to draw up, maybe after our stream too we could check it out a little bit,
Yeah.
but like the way that AI has impressed me most is with creating landscapes, or in a picture creating a sense of scale and multiple different, how do I put it? So like someone staring up at mountains,
Hmm.
really cool picture. But AI seems to be able to make it so that there's like so many different, more layers
Hmm.
to a background. It's hard for me to express.
Yeah. Yeah, no, I definitely, I mean, it's, yeah, it can really go above and beyond. And yeah, I mean, I've made things with AI that, yeah, not only could I have never made it, but it's like, it's hard to find someone who could have. And yeah, I mean, it's very, very cool. And it's just interesting because, like, on the one hand, we're talking about it as art. On the other hand, it's like as a commodity, I feel like. And I do think there are some differences in how it will take over. Maybe slower in the art, in the like genuine, like, I don't know. And maybe it'll take longer for people to
I
appreciate it as art.
I think art is a commodity that's just really bad at being reproduced over and over again. And so we instead value it for the fact that it's pretty bad at being propagated so easily. It's like, oh, I couldn't
Yeah.
make a million of these, so it's so artisanal and unique,
Well, yeah, I
I
think
think.
that's part of. I definitely agree that art is a commodity. You're not on camera, by the way. I don't know if you know that.
I know.
Okay,
I
okay.
will be
No,
shortly.
that's all good. Yeah, no worries. I definitely agree that art is a commodity, in the sense that everything becomes a commodity. But yeah, I mean, isn't like, yeah, it's like part of the appeal of art is also that it resists becoming a commodity. Um, I think.
Oh, interesting.
Yeah.
You think that there needs to be that resistance in order for it to derive some of its value?
I mean,
That juxtaposition is what gives it uniqueness.
I think it's part of it. Yeah, I think
Yeah.
yeah, the fact that it's hard to reproduce and hard to like, um, I don't know. Like, I think every artist feels like, well, when you put a lot of work into commodifying your stuff, it does change your relationship to it in some way. And I just feel like, yeah, AI, it serves a real function for art, but I don't know, like, what'll it be like in the future? Some people already, I'm sure, have tons of AI art all over their house, and that's really cool. I don't know if it'll take over in that same way, that it is taking over like industries,
Hmm.
just general art appreciation, but maybe it will. I mean, I never go back and look at the AI art, but like, I feel like I got sick of it, even though it's very, very cool. You know what I mean? And there's no reason to get sick of it. Like, I don't know.
Interesting. What
Yeah.
what did what did you can you articulate what you got sick of?
I just remember I was doing it a ton, and then I've not even been interested in the Mid Journey and other ones, even though I know they're very cool. I guess it's just like, it's a lot of power at your fingertips, but if you don't have like a reason to need that power, yeah, I'd rather like sit down with like a pen and paper, probably. uh, because that's part of the fun, is like just relaxing. But if I was like, oh, I need to make this specific cool image because I want to see it, then yeah, I'd go to AI. I guess I just, people have, yeah, I haven't felt much motivation for that, I guess. But like, I don't think I got sick of it because it's like objectively worth getting sick of. I just think, if it doesn't provide something you're specifically looking for, um, I don't know. Maybe it's just Yeah, I don't know. It's just a lot of power, but no, I didn't need it. I guess is maybe the best.
I was just gonna say it sounds to more to me like you just didn't need it.
Yeah, maybe that's
Um,
all it is. Yeah.
I'm fascinated by this. I can't wait to show it to um, boomers that I know and see how like just give them the like setup. Be like, here's a laptop. Type in whatever you want to see, and they're like, "What do you mean, whatever?"
Yeah.
And part of the fun for me actually is seeing what people ask of it.
Yeah.
I guess revealed preferences is that concept in economics that I keep going back to. It's so
Yeah.
interesting to me to just see like, what people decide that they want to see when the world is their limit and how big do they go. You know, some people
Yeah.
might just be like a ball and a cat,
Yeah.
or some people might be like pointillism inspired Albert
Yeah.
Einstein space blah blah. Yeah, I don't
I
know.
think that's really, really cool. Yeah. It's such a good time. And when I first explored it, it was with a friend and we spent hours just doing it. It's like it's a really, really beautiful thing. And that's art. I mean, that's the artistic appreciation of it. Um I wonder just what the I guess like what the shelf life is for some of this stuff. I'm not trying to say I think it's short. I just think that there is a limit for different people, and it'll be interesting to see how that plays out on a bigger scale. Like, do people more and more just get down with AI in movies? Because there is already controversy around it, right? I mean, there is already like people who are like, oh, the AI that they used in this Marvel movie like cheapened it, right? And like didn't look good and stuff. But obviously
I
that
think that's just because the execution was poor.
yeah, and fair enough.
I don't think it's truly an ideological opposition to it.
I that's what I'll be interested to see cuz maybe not in movies, but maybe in painting, but maybe not, and it comes up against maybe like irrational human pretentiousness, you know, which I feel like you would agree, like the feeling of like, oh, it needs to be human just because it's human. Like you could say there's something irrational about that, but there's something deep about that too. I feel like,
Yeah.
yeah,
Yeah, I agree with you. Should we pivot to talk about
yeah,
economics?
yeah. I think we solved all the problems of AI. What else should we do? Yeah. So you were surprised that I said that preferring a Marxist perspective over a capitalist perspective that I prefer that I think that's better.
Yeah.
Okay, I was surprised
Well,
you were surprised.
oh, really?
Yeah, I thought I've been pretty clear about like, hey, I don't think capitalism is a net good right now, and yeah,
Yeah, okay. So let's talk about it. I was surprised by that. I know that you've had uh I don't know, socialist leanings, if I want to call it that. Like you're maybe more for socializing certain things than I am as a way to solve what you see as problems, but
yeah.
I wouldn't have characterized you as someone that prefers I don't want to use the wrong terms, but
Say whatever.
prefers Marxist ideas to free market capitalist
Yeah.
ones.
Yeah, and I'm not like I don't think like capitalism's bad. Like I definitely don't try to talk about it in some sort of like, oh, it's bad. Like I think it's definitely a necessary stage in development, and it's like there's so much good that's come with capitalism, and we're talking about technological development. That's been a huge boon to capitalism, and then capitalism can drive more technological development. I just think the time has like definitely passed and like continues to pass when like we should be making sure that people's needs are met. And
What is
yeah,
that cutoff in your view? Like, at what point can you pinpoint when we pass that and
I
like
I just
transition?
I just feel like I just know like reading even just about the 1800s and like the fight for like a 10-hour workday or a 12-hour workday, and then a fight for just like reasonable conditions and like the not employing children in dangerous, like every advancement in like the rights of like just the majority of people has just been such a struggle. And so like I guess I think the time's always passing when like these advancements need to be made and just like taking care of more people. So like anytime that there is technological development and like economic development, it is the time to like draw in the like like to give that benefit to as many people as possible.
And do you see this as like a global objective, or is it a nationalist one?
That's, people much smarter than me debate this stuff. I feel like people sometimes argue like, well, my understanding is like, you can't really expect a country to be anti-capitalist in a capitalist world. It does not really make sense. They wouldn't be sustainable. It's like a company trying to be anti-capitalist, and you can't really necessarily succeed super well when you're in a capitalist environment. There's a piece of that. There's also a piece of like, so the world needs to be moving in a general direction, but also like I do think it makes sense for countries to probably organize like largely within their country, and then also with some coordination with other countries. I don't know if that really speaks to what you're asking, but yeah, it's like
No, it doesn't. I was trying to get at this concept that I think you're outlaying of there's a surplus of goods, services, wealth, and that's spread disproportionately throughout the population.
Yeah.
I wanted you to, and so we should redistribute that or find ways to make it so that the people who have less have more than they do right now, and the people who have more have less than they do right now.
Sure.
Which population?
So
this
if it's a
like
multinational
time horizon.
Yeah, if it's it does have to do with the time horizons thing. Yeah, I'm glad we talked about that. I feel like that's come up in my mind. I would say if it's a multinational corporation, I guess it's to the world, and that their profits should be. But I do think it's more about like just, it's not about distributing them to the populace, just to the workers of that corporation. Like I just think if like a corporation generates a ton of profits, that should go to the people involved, and they should have more of a say over how that corporation functions. And I think that's more of a useful and like direct way to improve things. It's not about, Shell needs to like distribute all its money to just random people or something like that. I think it should, like, if corporations are managed and owned by the most average people at those corporations, that creates so much more good for so many people. You could even look at like CEO pay used to be like 50 times like the production worker or something, and now it's like 500 times or something like that in the US. And I just think something like that is like, it's just such, I like that makes the world a worse place in my opinion, and it would be better to have more equality there. So it's, I guess it's less about what country the people are in and more like, are they affiliated, a part of that organization, and then like, do we agree that like the most average like common people in organizations should have more of a say rather than being just subservient.
Do you have some specific suggestions?
Well, I literally do think like that companies and organizations should be owned and managed by the average workers.
Okay. I have a company. I don't want my average workers to manage it. Are you gonna force me to?
No, I think if you are preventing your workers from unionizing, you should be forced to not do that. So I think
threat of government violence.
Yeah, but the way we force anyone to do anything.
Sure.
Yeah, I don't think you should be allowed to prevent your workers from unionizing in the same way you shouldn't be allowed to like abuse someone. I think that should be illegal. I think you should not have the right to prevent people from doing that. And then if they unionize, I trust people to sort of advocate for themselves. I don't think, the government should say every single detail of how, workers should relate to the I guess the initial owners of the means of production. But like, yeah, I think that, so I think you should be forced to some extent to let your workers unionize and speak for themselves. And then, whether that's ownership or just a lot more control over the, how things work. Either way, it's just a step in the right direction. But yeah.
I think I've tried. We've obviously talked about this general idea before, but I think that we've talked about maybe right and wrong, or what should things be like? Should the government have more or less control? Should there be like forced equity, or so to speak? Should the government get involved in trying to level wealth or income, something like that?
Yeah.
Maybe that's not the right question for us to explore. I don't know that we've really gotten anywhere. I think I'd like to take the tact of I can like empathize with why you feel that way,
Yeah.
and that you see suffering or people who don't have enough, and you see people that have a surplus, and the logical conclusion is, why don't we take from those who have more and give to those who don't?
Yeah.
This is the Robin Hood type
Sure.
idea.
Yeah.
But I think that the devil truly is in the details of this idea,
Yeah.
and that in trying to make the playing field level, as you may say, or try to um, give to those, take care of those who have a substandard situation, you create more suffering than you aim to remove. And I truly think that that is supported by any attempt in history to socialize things at a large scale. Not at a small scale, but at a large scale. I don't think it works.
I mean, there are people who would be definitely better to talk with about this than me because I
And
honestly,
me.
yeah,
And
but
me.
like my understanding is like I'm not here to defend like the USSR or China. I'm definitely not even that type of left wing person. You were asking me, or you mentioned via text, like videos I've mentioned Marxism in and stuff. I did have one video where I criticize another left wing person for being very pro China and basically whitewashing what China did to Tibet. And so there are all different types of left wing people, and there are people who will defend what these empires like USSR and China, what they've done. I'm not in any way like that. Still, I do think there's truth to be said that like I think we just got a follower. I think there's truth to be said that people, people do ignore like how the standard of living was raised in the USSR, for instance. How many people were no longer hungry, due to the
Until they were hungry.
yeah, and the question is, does that have to do with communism and the redistribution of wealth, or does that have to do with like bureaucratic state capitalism or just other issues? I'm not going to try to give you a vague opinion about it. I obviously your argument is on the basis of like how I think about things, and that you're saying, hey, it actually wouldn't bring more good. It would bring less good.
Yeah,
Yeah.
I do stand behind that, right?
Yeah. So you're arguing in terms I can relate to, but I guess we're at the point where it's like yeah, it's hard to. I don't know how to empirically. Are
We
there?
can
Yeah. Do you think there are
in times like
steps? Yeah.
sorry, go ahead. Go
No,
ahead.
no, no. Please, please. Yeah.
Yeah, I think in times like this where we feel like we just don't have the tools to answer that kind of question, and it would just be conjecture that maybe people do or don't find interesting, but where it's like not very fact based. You go to first principles. You try to answer the most basic questions that underlie this question, and then see if you can come up with something that looks like a reasonable answer. So,
Yeah.
what the fuck am I talking about? Like, if why do you go to work? Like, to ask certain questions of
Yeah.
like, why do people work? Um, why do people work really hard? What drives innovation? Like, answer some of those questions. Ask things like, where do medical innovations come from? What incentives need to be in place for people to innovate in the medical field? Stuff like that.
Yeah.
And then try to see, like, okay, which of these systems incentivizes this more? Which of these systems incentivize them less?
Yeah, I just think that's a bit of like I feel like there are fallacies hidden in there cuz I feel like it's like the fact that we're in this system itself and it's been so dominant for hundreds of years. It's tempting to like I guess assume that like it's more of the cause of certain advancements than maybe I would think is justified. But the general my general idea with like critiquing capitalism is the fact that it puts us all in, or most of us in positions where we can only sell our ability to work, and we have to sell that. We don't have the ability to like I don't have my own farm. It's very rare for people to like have their own property necessarily. Obviously, a lot of people do, but it's more and more rare as time goes by for people to have their own property and to have more ownership in what they make. And that's like not just unfulfilling thing for people, but it's like it makes it so people are always dependent, you know, on whatever like jobs might be out there for them to do. One question that's come up, I think, in one of our previous conversations, it's definitely something I've always been like confused about is like, are there more people than jobs? And are there more people than good jobs? And are like, if there are more people than jobs, like that's a really bad situation. If people need to sell their labor to live. And I guess I think that like our system creates a huge amount of people that are just fully dependent on a system that also doesn't necessarily need them, unless it does and then it doesn't anymore. And I just, yeah, I don't know. You know, obviously, I think there should be radical change, but I do think it has to come in like a step by step way. And so, like, yeah, I'd be curious, like, what's gonna take us more in the right direction without, yeah, what, like, you have to look at something like, yeah, all the, you know, hunger or just like the downsides of our current system, and like, does it have to be that way, or you know, are there ways to shift things to make it a little bit better? But yeah, I know I just said a bunch of different stuff, so I don't know if
That's
that's
okay.
too much.
What aspects of our system specifically do you think cause privation?
I think that it's like when there's money that's made, it's always sort of accumulated in a in equal way. So that just increases itself where, you know, a business makes a ton of money and a huge chunk of it goes to a small group of people, and then that just happens on a massive scale. And so that creates a system where like it's a smaller and smaller group of people. I think like 3 people in the world have the amount of money of like 500 million, or it could be several billion actually. I sort of forget, but yeah, we've created a system where it just gets more and more unequal, right? And that's like a function of capitalism. I'm sure you would agree that that's just kind of how it probably has to be in this system, or no? I don't, because that's, yeah,
Uh, okay, a couple different things. People who have money, have a lot of money, have access to higher rates of returns than people who don't.
exactly,
There are, so mathematically speaking, yeah, you
yeah,
have money, you have opportunities to make more money.
yes,
If you have $0, you can't invest in anything that can make you more money.
yeah,
I'm not arguing that. I think that it's maybe envious is the right word to use, or it's like looking into thy neighbor's bowl would be like the biblical way to say it. To look at a system that I would call relatively free market, not perfectly free, but relatively free, and use capitalism as a pejorative while also saying, look at these 3 people that are worth $300 billion together. Isn't that so bad? Instead of saying, in the path of them getting to this net worth, look at how much these other people were also raised up with them. No, not proportionately as much,
yeah.
but also it increased the size of the total pie at the same time.
Would you agree that everybody else was raised up the absolute minimum possible to raise them up?
Yeah.
Yeah, because that's my argument. And then that it's always the absolute minimum.
I don't see anything wrong with that.
I think what's wrong with that is when you look at like, and I'm not trying to use capitalism as a pejorative. I really am trying to be neutral and just talk about, you know, aspects of it that might be negative. And I do think there are aspects that are positive.
But you sneer every time you say capitalism.
I don't try to. I don't try
Kidding,
to.
I'm kidding.
Yeah,
I'm
yeah.
just kidding.
But yeah. I mean, you know, you look at like Amazon worker dies in the warehouse. Amazon workers have to pee. You know, they don't get break. You know, they have to pee in bottles. They don't get breaks and stuff like that. And you see like, and that's just genuine human suffering that does not need to exist, in my opinion. But it necessarily does exist when you have a system where a small group makes the rules for a big group. I don't believe in the like, you know, these wealthy capitalists made jobs for these other people. I think that they make jobs whenever they need to so that they can continue to use their money to make more money at increasing rates. I don't think that's a good thing to do for other people. And I don't want to live in a world where those other people need to rely on making the absolute minimum from a wealthy person who's trying to enrich themselves. When I think there are better options, I think people can have more ownership of, endeavors and
I
stuff.
think
Like that.
maybe if I could just say what I know about you, the crux of your argument sort of lies in the fact that it seems like it's a seller's market from an employment standpoint, and the power of employment is concentrated in such a small number of people that there's this illusion of workers' bargaining power, but in reality, whatever Bezos and the other 10 employers say is what the market will bear.
Right.
And so if they want the minimum wage to be $8 an hour, that's what it's going to be, because there's so many jobs reliant on that this idea of supply and demand really is an illusion, where I would like to say, well, if Amazon's not paying enough or if their worker conditions aren't good enough, people can just leave and find a job elsewhere. But if they're the only employer in 20 miles, or if all three employers say the same thing,
Yeah.
truly, what are you going to do as a worker?
Yeah.
So I would, is that a fair?
Yeah, 100%. Yeah.
So I would look at that and go, I get that that's a problem. I agree that that's a problem. I don't think that socializing it is the answer, or even unionizing is the answer. I see that as a free market, which I think we're calling capitalism, where people who have money can choose to exchange it with other people consensually, has been captured. I considered it to be crony capitalism, where the regulators are in cahoots with the large employers, and you have this illusion of a free market, but in reality, the government does have their hand in the cookie jar.
Yeah.
And you get this worst of both worlds, where companies are profit oriented.
Yeah.
They're motivated by seeking and maximizing profits. And the government exerts just enough control such that your free market supply and demand is disrupted, but it's not so much in control that you could change the levers and say, people are now making $30 an hour.
And you know what? I guess I would say that I totally agree that it's not a totally free market. I would argue that there's no ability to have a totally free market, because how could a free market ever exist and not influence regulators to give them what they want?
No regulators.
What?
You don't need to have regulators. You could remove the regulators.
Okay. So, yeah, I don't have no regulations on business in any way. I don't get.
Perhaps. I'd be willing to explore the idea.
I literally don't know. I don't even, I can't even understand what that would look like. That's never existed.
I frankly see it as we almost don't have regulators to some extent, and companies just kind of go wherever they want to anyway. Maybe slightly retarded by the regulations that they have to skirt around.
Yeah.
But in no way are the people meaningfully protected.
Right now. You're saying right now.
Right now. Yeah, right now.
I agree, and that's why it's but that's the idea of having literally no regulators. I'm not even saying I think it's a bad idea. I don't get how that works. In a society, you're there's so no one is no one sets rules, I guess, for anything. It's really hard to conceptualize.
I know. Yeah, we're so used to a system that's rules and regulations everywhere. But do you want to help me move a piano for $500 tomorrow?
Okay,
that's a serious question. That's not rhetorical.
I can't make it. I'm working.
Okay, fine.
Yeah.
We don't need a regulator as part of that transaction. I gave you an offer. You said no.
Yeah.
Fine.
Okay, but you don't think that this degree of consensuality exists for all like transactions and contracts.
No, but it could.
I don't know how it could without. The only way that I think it could is if everybody's needs were met.
What needs?
Food, shelter, water, because and medical stuff. And that would create a world where workers have the bargaining power that free market capitalists pretend they do. You would actually be able to. I don't know how capitalism ever doesn't become what you're calling crony capitalism. It seems like that's required. I would like to live in a world without a government, but I think that's only like a world that I would want to live in if workers had control in the industries. Because what happens, I won't move the piano. What happens if you're like, I'm going to go hire like 10 5-year-olds to move the piano and I'm going to pay them $1 a day? I'm like, I want to call the police. Like, I hope there are police I can call. You know what I mean?
I think there's actually a fantastic argument to be made that, like, especially for like third world countries, that child labor is a really important part of their economy. That like helps. I mean, no. If their option is like they're not going to have enough food, or they can sew some shoes for like $3 a day. Anyway, let's
no. I'm
not
not judging you. I'm just like. You come at stuff from the perspective of like given the circumstances, and I kind of get that, but it's like these circumstances, yeah, that should not be the better option.
We live in a world of circumstances. You don't just get to wave the magic wand and say, if it were this way. That's not the world we live in.
I think there's a question of like, can we shift around some of those puzzle pieces so our best option isn't kids working? I don't dislike the idea of kids being busy.
Okay, there's this like hour that you keep using, and it really bugs me because there's like this crazy hyper nationalist argument that's embedded in what you're saying, and no, you don't see it that way.
I remember this coming up, and I know what you're speaking about because I remember talking about this previously. So how did I say our? Like our priorities, or?
No, like people need to have all of their needs met.
Yeah.
You said like if everyone has their needs met, and so when you say everyone, like you mean Americans, right? You certainly don't mean like sulfur miners in Indonesia as well.
Of course I do. Yeah.
We do not have the kind of excess. There does not exist the kind of surplus in our system to bring everyone that you're saying up to some level that you're saying, nor does the infrastructure, expertise, or services exist worldwide to provide those basic living needs that you think we can do.
I totally don't agree.
Really?
Yeah.
So like in, let's just say like the middle of Kenya, people don't have the kind of medical care that you would like everyone to have. How are you going to get physicians to provide medical care and hospitals in that random remote village to bring them up to a level that you think they should be at?
I mean, with no historical, specific historical knowledge or anything, you pay them, and you pay them probably out of a fund that like multinational companies give to Kenya for exploiting them for the last whatever number of years. So there would have to be some sort of like reimbursement for the huge amount of money transfer from these countries that are struggling so much. They would need to be reimbursed as some sort of like amends, or I don't know what the word for it is.
Reparations is
that's the word I'm looking for.
Do you see it as we're extracting and repressing currently?
There's a phrase for it, and I've been wanting to read more about it, but it's like unequal transfer or unequal transfer. It's like these companies go into these countries, they obviously provide certain things and they employ certain people, but it's unequal the amount they take versus what they give. But dude, to your point, like, no, I definitely think that there is like enough to go around. That is a fundamental part of my beliefs. I don't think that's even naive. Like, to me, it's like, seems like, yeah, that would cost a lot of money, but I'm pretty sure that's a small fraction of the money that exists and the resources that exist. America, but even if you did just look at it on a national scale, dude, like America does not take care of ourselves. Like, we don't take care of ourselves. So even if it just started there for us, and each country kind of does it on their own, even though that's not really, I guess, practical.
I'm gonna toss some numbers at you.
Yeah.
Global GDP is just under $90 trillion. There's 8 billion people. Comes out to be about 10,000 per person, for every man, woman, and child on Earth.
Okay.
GDP per capita for the world. Does that make sense?
I'm not. Yeah, I don't know enough about these like what even GDP is and how that stack gets formed.
Gross domestic product.
Yeah.
It's a aggregation of all goods and services that are transacted
Yeah.
in a given region. So if we say like the GDP of the United States is $18 trillion, that means like every time you bought a burger from Wendy's, that went into that number.
Okay.
Every time you collected $1 in income from a service that you provided, that goes towards that number.
Yeah.
That's your gross domestic product.
Okay.
The total value of commerce,
Okay.
basically. So if that's 10,000 per person on Earth, I have a hard time understanding how you are going to provide a hospital, physician, food, transportation, all of these basic necessities that I'm assuming you're including in what people need
Sure.
for that
Yeah.
amount. If it were an order of magnitude higher, I think I might start to agree with you, but
If the
it's not there.
GDP was an order of magnitude higher, people would be producing more where you feel like it could apply to enough people to help them. I don't know whether I understand why looking at GDP makes sense even because
There's not enough the argument I'm trying to make is there isn't even nearly enough surplus to do the kind of humanitarian type aid that you're describing.
If Jeff Bezos makes 2 billion last year, and does that go into the GDP for this year? Or
Well, it makes 2 billion in what?
right, like
No, I'm asking you. It makes 2 billion
profit,
how?
I guess. Because
This matters because oftentimes people will conflate like income with wealth.
right
Be like he's worth $100 billion.
but
Like,
GDP
he has,
refers to revenue, I would assume, not profit.
yeah, not net worth.
Yeah, not net worth, but then once you take that revenue and you take a huge chunk as profit, that doesn't go into the next year's GDP. It's just your profit.
No, it doesn't.
So I just don't know that GDP feels like the thing to look at because I'm wondering more about like the resources that are amassed already. But regardless, I mean, to your point, yeah, like, there are some things that scale, like, medical centers, transportation, they obviously help a lot of people, you don't build them individually for people, obviously, but don't get me wrong. I'm not trying to be idealistic. I understand that like it costs a ton of money to meet people's needs. I just think that should be the priority. I think, and I guess should is a moral word, but like in my scheme of looking at things, like if we're gonna have governments, the point is to meet our needs. And I think governments get hijacked. Yeah.
By definition, the government's role is to protect our rights.
That's what I'm saying. Yeah, and I think part of our rights should be food, water, shelter, and yeah, I think that should be a right.
So what would the constitutional amendment say that you would write to add that?
You're giving me so much power. I'm like, fuck, now I'm nervous. I have to write the amendment?
But if you have to be specific and narrow about it, it's just too lazy is maybe the wrong word because it sounds like an insult. But it is intellectually lazy to say something like everyone should have this level of life, liberty, pursuit of happiness. Yeah, I like stories too.
So you agree yeah. Well, I'm saying it's possible. I do think it's possible also. And it's interesting that we disagree on that because that's a big difference.
I think it's possible in the future.
Okay.
I don't think it's I think it's a much further into the future possibility than you're projecting it to be. And I think that trying to do it prematurely ends in mass suffering.
I actually totally agree, and from what I've read, that's part of what happened with the USSR is they never actually had even a significant capitalism phase. And so they tried to collectivize what was not maybe a significant enough amount of abundance. But I think what you're saying is kind of selling capitalism short in a funny way. Because it's like, actually, I think capitalism has produced such amazing abundance that I actually do like literally think, I don't think I'm being idealistic. I think there is enough to go around. And I think the idea of there being too many people is a myth. I think there's not too many people. I think we could totally, but I don't know. It's maybe
I
pointless
don't
to.
think there's too many people.
You don't think there's too many people. You just, I mean,
No.
relative to the resources. That's what I mean. Like,
Yes, relative to the
yeah, yeah, yeah.
resources to do what you're
Yeah,
describing.
no, I definitely don't.
Globally speaking, yeah.
I don't think that. I really don't. And maybe, obviously that answering that question in any sort of legitimate empirical way would require so much more knowledge and study than I'm aware of. But my impression is that's not true. How I would write the amendment is I would say, everyone has a right to, food and water to meet their basic daily needs and shelter. And obviously, there are some specifics, but I don't feel like you go into all the specifics in the amendment. I feel like that's more like case law later or something like that. But yeah, it would have to be like, I mean, people have the right to, like, I don't know all the details, but I read something recently that like Ronald Reagan, or I think it was him, like cut public housing funding by like an enormous amount. Like there are a lot of like government officials who will like literally take money away from meeting people's needs. So I just think, we should do the opposite of that. And, I don't know that public housing solves all problems, but like people need a place to sleep if they want to and so on. And, yeah, I think that works. Do you deal with it maybe on a local scale as much as possible rather than international? Yeah, probably. I mean, you do whatever you can. Yeah.
So it's weird to me to hear you in the same breath say that capitalism has created such overwhelming abundance.
Yeah.
And also juxtapose it with the idea of, and we should cut it off at the knees to share the wealth because the current system won't do that. We have enough. Do it now. It's interesting because I personally think that it makes far more sense to let it ride on the system that's proving to grow the entire pie size rather than say, birthday party now, let's divvy it up. I would rather continue to grow the pie.
Why is the growing the pie even worthwhile though? If it's not to like feed the people, not to.
Maybe it is, but maybe we want to feed 10 trillion people instead of 10 billion people.
I think this goes back. I'm so glad we started. Sometimes when we start with like a philosophical thing, it's really cool because it'll like come back.
Pays dividends.
Yeah, and the time scale
horizon,
thing. Yeah, because my mind is like you have to prioritize current living people. Not over the future, but you have to make sure they're involved in the consideration to a somewhat significant extent. And yeah, like I think capitalism creates enormous abundance. I just think it inherently will accumulate it in very, very small places, huge amounts. And
by definition, it will.
Yeah.
But I think that's almost. I know it sounds like that's what we should fixate on, but I don't think that that's the right take on it.
You think it's okay for it to accumulate in that way, and you can still provide for people's needs.
And there's mobility within it. I mean, more important to me is there mobility for new people to amass wealth? Is there more wealth being created? Is there more income being created?
Yeah.
I'm more interested in, is there that opportunity for people?
And
if people want to work hard, can they find that opportunity? That's the question I'm more interested in a system providing, rather than these 5 standard deviation unique cases are able to amass 1,000x more than the next highest person.
Right.
It just doesn't matter to me.
It doesn't matter to me either. What matters to me is the millions of people not able to amass anything. You know what I mean? So it's like, I don't really care about the $50 million yacht, except that it means that's, it's just disgusting to think about all the people, with not enough food to eat in the same city.
This is so interesting. So Elon Musk, a figure most people have heard of by now. In a interview I saw of him, he was like talking about, maybe it was like Elizabeth Warren proposing like a wealth tax or something like that, which the logistics of which are just completely asinine. They're proposed by someone who doesn't even understand how stock works. It doesn't matter. He made the point, I think a very prescient point, that the conversation really ought not to be about wealth. And I get world's richest man, that seems different coming from him. Maybe he's not anymore. But what we should be concerned with is consumption. and I totally agree with him on this. It's the people who are buying super yachts and 8 planes and 100 apartments around the world that should make you go, well, that doesn't seem fair. That person doesn't need to consume that much. Amassing wealth isn't nearly or even to me at all concerning. It's a reflection of, did they build a product that people want that was successful? And other people can even share in that growing of that wealth, especially in public or private companies. Consumption should make you feel a little bit upset because when there are people that are mining sulfur, getting toxic gases into their lungs every day of their life for $6 a day, and someone over there spent $6 every second on fuel trying to get from Antigua to Hawaii, that should make you feel a little bit angry because it's consumption, not aggregation of wealth, but consumption. And so in the same breath, Elon was like, I don't have super yachts. He does have a jet that he flies. He has, I don't know, I call it a moderate amount of rich person consumption, but certainly not to the scale of like the tycoon billionaire super yacht type thing of like excess consumption.
That's interesting.
So I think consumption is an important thing to consider there.
That's so interesting because I guess I don't even care about that side of it. Like that wouldn't rub me the wrong way. Like it's really, because like if someone makes billions of dollars and they don't consume anything, and they just live super simple life.
Buffett is this example.
Right. What do? They reinvest all that money into future ventures.
Yeah, sure does.
And that is to me not more moral. It's not better than buying a super yacht because all those ventures, the goal is the same as the original ventures, which is to accumulate the wealth in as small number of hands as possible. And that's
the goal of it, or is that an effect of it?
That's the goal. I guess you could have other goals, but like you wouldn't. That's the main goal is to.
You ask Buffett, that's not what he would tell you. He would say it's to return value to the shareholders.
That's what I mean. That's what I'm saying.
Oh.
Yeah, that is what I'm saying.
But everyone can be a shareholder. Then maybe you should be concerned with, can everyone get in on this game? Rather than, is this only a game for the few?
I think letting everyone in on the game is what I'm saying, but that does fundamentally change the game.
But you don't have to socialize everything in order to get everyone in on the game.
So having everyone be a board member, or what do you mean then? If everyone was a board member,
buy a share of the company.
If everyone had a share of the company, then it would be closer to what I'm saying with social.
But I don't want the government doing that. I'd rather I would vehemently oppose the government doing that because they're horribly incompetent at it, and that leads to tragedy. Instead, I would be more concerned with how can we make it so that people can come up with $50 to buy a share of this company.
Yeah, but if you keep it where people are buying shares, then you're still just saying like people's money is their ticket to. You're still ruling out people without money from the ownership. So like, how do we make sure everyone has, how do we get everyone the amount of money necessary to be able to have ownership hypothetically in the company they work for is a good question, because that sort of just shortcuts to what the point is anyways, to have people's needs be met and be able to pay for things.
This is so interesting to me. I'd rather have those people, on average anyway, the people who that you're, I guess, casting with a broad stroke as being like wealth accumulators. I'd rather them be the ones making decisions at the corporate level. I think they're much more effective and productive with capital than your average person. I think they know what they're doing. I think that they're making better decisions, more productive decisions that your average person would not know what to do. Your average person knows how to spend, but your average person doesn't understand investing, doesn't understand growing something for the future.
Right. I just think efficient and productive investment of capital leads towards efficient and productive investment of capital leads towards efficient and productive investment of capital, and
Leads towards extreme surplus, as you said.
which is always stratified. And like if
It is disproportionately stratified, but also it's growing the low end of the pie as well.
I think that's a little bit not. I think that's not necessarily.
Look at China, man. Look at what China has done over the last few decades. They have a middle class now that they didn't have before. It was all ag all the time. They have a
Right.
middle class.
Yeah, I mean that sounds good. I think the idea that like accumulating wealth does help the lowest. I think ignores all the people it doesn't help. I agree that it does raise some of the lowest to a middle. I think it also pushes a lot of the lowest into a worse situation where they're just dependent every single day for a wage to be able to not even really meet their needs. So I agree that like having these capitalists, making these decisions is more effective, but I think it's effective towards a goal that is not my goal, I guess, and is not the goal I think should be the main goal. Yeah.
You had described having a base floor, a base level of living standard for every man, woman, and child on Earth that would include healthcare, food, shelter.
Yeah.
Fair enough?
Yeah.
How much of the US federal budget do you think goes towards Social Security, welfare, Medicare, Medicaid?
A lot. A huge ton. Like maybe more than half. I don't even know. Or like a lot.
It's more than half.
Yeah.
It's about 65%
Yeah.
of the federal budget goes towards those four things I listed.
And it'll only
the
get worse, right? Like you probably acknowledge that's only going to go up. Like as time goes by, we're going to be needing to spend even more money on welfare, with AI and everything. No? I mean,
Let's table that particular aspect.
because I know
of
where
the-
you're going, and but what my you're making a valid point, which is like we try to distribute the wealth, or I'm sorry, yeah.
I think that our current system is already attempting to do what you're describing
Yes.
by providing this base level of living,
Yes.
and it does a horrible job of it.
Yes. Exactly. And
Why would we want to do more of that? Why would we want to give the government more resources, more power, more say
I'm
over
not
our
talking
lives?
about that. I'm not talking about giving the government more power. I think giving
You
the
absolutely are. By socializing something, you are.
I talked about previously, like giving the government. The only thing I've mentioned on this call is the government having the right to force companies to not prevent people from unionizing.
That's a tremendous amount of power.
That they used to. I feel like that was normal in the past. It was normal for companies to not be able to prevent union bust, and it's become a lot more common to bust unions and to like in all the ways that I couldn't even explain and don't understand to prevent unionizing. Is it growing the government or is it just changing an aspect of the government? I look, your point is totally valid. The welfare state does a horrible job. I agree. I don't think that's how we should do things. I don't think we should just like let wealth accumulate and then take as much as we can from some of these people and try to redistribute it and try to let the government do that. I don't think that's giving people a lot of freedom. I think if you let people have more of a voice at their employer and have more of a sense of control where they spend half their life, I think that's true freedom and not just building dependence of people on a government. Yeah.
When you say more of a voice,
Yeah.
I say, hello, welcome to Wendy's. What does that voice look like? Does that mean that I get to decide if the McDouble's back on the menu?
That's a great
Or
question.
I get to say, like, actually, I'd like to make double what I make right now.
You get to get together with your coworkers and say, hey, do we like that, they keep us an hour late and don't pay us? Do we like that they they don't pay us enough and it's, they make us work on certain holidays because they don't want to hire more people. Maybe if we ran this, we would say, let's hire a few more people so, things are a little bit better. Let's pay ourselves more. Yeah, let's take a bigger chunk out of the revenue, give less to the owner of the franchise or whatever, and take it for ourselves. That's what I mean by a voice. I think, and I do think it would mess with
That's
the.
just theft with extra steps. That's
I,
not a voice.
I think it's theft for where more people benefit from the theft than the current state of theft.
That doesn't. You see, the current one is theft.
The whole idea with criticizing capitalism and the accumulation of capital is that what capital is literally is unpaid wages. Like, so
I understand.
yeah,
This is capital coming back.
it's the
This
idea is
this
like,
saying like you produce. I understand. You pay someone less than they can
do you
produce, and
agree
you
with that
collect
or
the
no?
profit as excess.
Yeah.
Yeah. By
Yeah.
by definition.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah.
But
Yeah.
by putting forth the capital,
Yeah.
you create the environment for someone to be able to produce more than they are paid. The labor doesn't just show up at Home Depot and say, I'm gonna start producing more.
Yeah.
You have to have someone come by with a truck full of lawn mowing equipment that cost money to buy in order for those people to go actually do something more with it.
Totally, for sure. And it does work the other way too, where you need labor to
Absolutely.
continue advancing capital. But yeah,
But the person putting the capital out is taking a larger risk.
yes. Well, I don't know about that because it's like you're taking a larger risk financially, but other people are like dependent on a wage for life. So it's a little bit hard for me to say. But like, I think the problem I have is with all of our money-making endeavors being based around how to make more. So like you're right that like yeah, capital is the like without capital you don't continue to accumulate. I think the idea is like can we structure how we produce things less on the basis of trading them for the most profit and more on the basis of giving things to go around. I know this sounds utopian or idealistic. I just don't think we need to live in a world where like every endeavor is based around maximizing profit.
Okay.
Yeah.
So let's go back to the McDonald's or Wendy's example.
I like that one. Wendy's.
What's to stop them from saying, actually, instead of the CEO pay being 1,000 to 1 of the lowest paid worker, now it's going to be 1 to 1,000, and the CEO gets $10 an hour.
Yeah.
We each get $1,000 an hour.
Yeah. So then the CEO quits, right? And they try to find another CEO, and I guess they don't find one, probably, right?
What I'm getting at is like, what's to stop the workers from quite literally draining the organization dry immediately?
Oh. Yeah, that's an interesting, detailed question. I don't necessarily think that, I mean, I don't think having unionizing power necessarily means you have the right to, like, dissolve the company. I don't know where that line is, and that's a valid question.
Who draws that line?
That's a totally valid question. I guess, like...
That's a real question to answer.
I've never thought about that because it seems like people would be putting themselves out of a job. But there are some endeavors where, like, literally, if the workers got paid enough, it would actually tank the company. And I think there's probably like especially some like artistic and if I put on a play with my friend and we all try to get paid a good amount, like it's not happening. So I don't know, there are certain things where so if I unionize with people, should we have the right to then drain the company? Like, no. I mean, I don't know. Yeah, where does that money go? I don't know, man. That's a valid... I'm going to have to give that more thought, like where that line is. Yeah.
Because I know that like the assets of the company don't mean anything to me. If I could work there for like $30 an hour, like a good living wage for the next 20 years and then retire with a house and a Rolex, that's nice.
Sure.
But you know what's nicer? Selling off every asset they own, taking a payday now, and then going somewhere else and doing it again.
I think people don't mind working at the end of the day. I think we do like working as long as we can feel some good stuff about our job.
You ever been to a Wendy's?
I think look, if like, I don't know what I'm trying to, like, if all fast food unionized and then disappeared, I guess I'd be fine with that. I don't know.
No, but there's the concept that I introduced is like a limiting principle. What is the limiting principle that we're describing here?
I mean, the limiting principle might be like the money that's already amassed. I don't know whether I'm advocating the union goes and like kidnaps the CEO and takes their assets. I don't know. I think maybe like if the money's been amassed already, it's gone. I don't know. But no, it's a valid question. Like, where is that line? That's a really valid question. And people who know more than me would have a much better answer. I don't know if it would. Yeah.
I think I wouldn't assume that people have a better answer to that question.
They'd gotta have a better one
I
than me. I don't know if it would be perfect, but they'd have to have a better one than me.
I think my major critique of what you're espousing is that you run into a question like this, whichever way you go, where the collective being in the controls of the levers goes nowhere good fast because there are no limiting principles. The incentives get completely subverted in a way that topples the system altogether. I'm not in any way defending how excess consumption by the few feels really unfair. I'm not defending that. I just think, as the common, I don't remember which economist said this, capitalism is the worst system except for all of the other ones. And I do believe that.
I just don't. Yeah, I don't. I feel like that paints it as if we've like really tried an alternate shift, and I don't. I mean, you talk about China, like, is all their good middle class stuff or related to capitalism? Is some of it related to their collectivism in the last century? I'm not going to pretend to answer that. I don't think we should jump to an answer, though. I feel like it's complicated. I think maybe a limiting principle for what we were just talking about is like, yeah, you get a union, and the union says we want to dissolve the company, or we want all the money, we want all the CEO's money, or we're striking, is what they would do, right? Because that's what a union does. Like, the right to strike is a huge part of it, and they would strike, and they would all get fired. And right, I mean, that's the limiting principle. And I just think if we did make sure that people had the right to unionize, that company hires a bunch more people, they unionize, and maybe they do it differently. You know, they're like, hey, you know, maybe we don't need that. Maybe we don't need that. I don't know. And is that worse or better? I don't know. Yeah.
You can say, like, I guess workers do or don't have the right to unionize, but if they all just coordinate and don't show up on the same day, effectively that creates a union where there's bargaining power.
100%. Yeah, yeah. And I'm saying, and like, I want that to be more possible. I think it's a better world when workers do have more of a say. I think organizations.
I'm cool with that.
Say what?
I'm cool with that.
Yeah.
Just not. I don't want to lay that power at the foot of the government. I want to find a different alternative route to empower workers to pressure their employers to provide a more reasonable comparison.
I mean, I can't argue with that. Yeah, I fully agree. Like, I don't want it to be a government thing either. I just know that capital has always used the levers of the government to advance its own interests, and that's why U.S. has like the worst unions of any developed country, I think. I mean, I think.
I can't speak to that.
Yeah,
Does like Somalia have better? You said developed.
I think when you compare, I honestly don't know, but I think when you compare the U.S. to like other like highly industrialized countries, we've watered down our unions a lot. And I just look, we can disagree about certain things, but that's clearly like capital doing that. I mean, on the government saying, hey, like, let's do this. And I just think it's not fair to say, well, now we're enlarging the government if we undo something like that. But I get that it's a fine line, and I'm not just trying to mince, semantics or whatever. Yeah.
Do you I know that you're more familiar with China than most, but maybe you don't know. You don't.
I'm not that familiar.
You're not a scholar.
No.
Are you familiar with the Great Leap Forward?
Yeah.
Do you know what that refers
to? But like
to?
not even that well. Yeah. Like I know that that's the Mao, like, moving forward by doing certain collectivism and stuff like that. Yeah.
It was a disaster.
Okay.
And it wasn't because of capitalist type things. It was specifically because of collectivist type things, where it was a collective goal, but it was still ultimately decided by a few.
Yeah.
Where the power was concentrated in the hands of the few.
Yeah.
Which it always will be, even if it gives you the illusion that it's in the power of many. Even unions have reps.
Sure.
Even unions have leaders. Power gets concentrated, and mass tragedy ensued. People ended up melting down their farm equipment in order to not overproduce food, and famine ensued.
You really do deserve to talk with someone who knows more about this stuff. I'm not even just saying that to be like humble or something. Like Like, cause I really don't, and so I can't.
Neither do I.
But you deserve it, because if I did, I'd be able to push back a little bit and say like, well, here's what it
Well, then
is.
I'm gonna get a champion too.
You're gonna get a what?
A champion, like someone who will espouse this stuff better than I can.
That's true. That's true. And then we're both out of work here. I mean, yeah, I don't, I'm not the type. There's a bunch of different type of, people who critique capitalism. I definitely don't believe in like a benevolent few guiding us towards revolution. I will never believe in that.
Fuck that.
Yeah, I would never believe in that, and I'm definitely not a Maoist, and I don't, I don't know, man. You do have to definitely reckon with the harm of capitalism. To make arguments like this, you have to reckon with that as well. And I feel like it's easy to put that out of your mind because that's the normal harm that we live in every day. And it's easier to say, well, this weird harm that happened stands out. But there's so many people not getting their needs met every single day in horrible ways. And so yeah.
The pitch you're making is sexier and promises more and is more empathetic and sounds better, but truly the devil is in the details. And it isn't doing it justice to be hand wavy about any of it. That, listen, I know capitalism has some goods, but I think it does more harm than good. This other way of doing things will be better is a mistake that has been made before.
I mean, you got to give me credit for I am being nuanced, and I'm not trying to express any certainty where I don't have it. And I'm not.
I know that.
Yeah. I just think
But you are hand waving some of the detailed implementation of which things do we socialize, how would that work, which aspects specifically of capitalism that I think are negative are a function of capitalism, which has, as opposed to which are just human nature that'll show up in any system.
So, I mean, yeah, like I think I'm hand waving certain things and you're hand waving certain things, and maybe you're putting more pressure on me to come up with answers for stuff, and so I'm forced into that position. But yeah, I mean, if I say to you like, how do we, there's like 10% of like the country we live in where like people don't have enough food to eat. How do you recommend we rectify that?
There's 10% of people don't have enough food to eat. What does that mean?
Like they go hungry. They don't get the nutrition they need.
There's 10% of people that are going hungry, meaning like malnourished,
yes,
or like starving to death. What are we talking about here?
Malnourished, I think. Yeah.
Yeah, you have the interwebs.
Yeah. I mean, is malnourished not bad enough?
Shouldn't we? So the way I would do it, if I were going to be just tongue in cheek, I would socialize obesity in this country. We have 60%, 70% of people are overweight or obese. So I would compel, by force of the government, the people who eat too much to give some of their food to people who don't have enough to eat.
Are you joking or are you serious?
No, I said tongue in cheek.
Okay, yeah, because I don't, but like, what I'm trying to show is how if you're put in the position that you've been putting me in, it's very hard not to hand wave certain aspects when you're asked to directly address.
You want a serious answer to that question?
I mean, you've asked me serious questions.
I don't think it's, that's fair enough.
Yeah.
I don't think it's actually 10%, but I'll assume
it's
that
1 in 8 children and 40 million U.S. citizens. So you can't wave that away.
I'll assume that it is.
Yeah.
There's a surplus of people willing to give to charity for food, people willing to give you food if you ask for it on the street. Churches, synagogues, and Sikh temples will give you food if you ask for it. I would argue that in a lot of cases, this is not a problem of hunger, but it's a problem of bad parenting, education, probably those two.
So you think the problem is just that these people haven't looked hard enough for food?
I do.
That's a very nice belief, I guess.
You think they don't have enough money to buy food and so they go hungry?
I think, yeah, people don't have enough money. They don't have churches and synagogues in their area that provide food. They don't have time because they're working 2 jobs. They don't have time to go to those churches when they're open, if they even exist. And dude, I mean, like, you can't get everything you need at these places. Like,
do you know what % of those people are on snaps?
No, I don't. No, I have no idea. But I know I've had friends on food stamps, and it's like it's still you might not get everything you need. You know.
You can get all the calories you need and all the nutrients you need on like 250 a day.
But you agree that we should not. It's like not a good solution, the welfare state, and it doesn't. It's not like an actual manageable, sustainable solution, right? I mean,
Yes, but also we're locked in this prisoner's dilemma of no politician can ever make the promise of augmenting or cutting the programs because it's a complete third rail of politics. You won't get elected if you say you're going to change them. Full stop.
yeah, because well, I mean, there were people recently in some states saying that like there were no hungry children in their state when in reality there were. And so people will cut school lunches for kids. That was what the conversation was about. People will cut this stuff. I mean, you know, I don't know that there's ever a real permanent third rail, but I just don't think it's just like it's such a nice thought that like it's just user error that there's hunger and malnourishment. I just I don't see the evidence for that it's just user error. I do think there's an issue with people's access to their the things they need, both with money and literally in their area. But I was just trying to make the point of like there's always yeah.
No, I see the point you're trying to
Yeah,
make.
there's
that,
always
like,
some hand waving that you have to do when you're trying to tackle a big issue in a in a little conversation. But yeah, I mean, yeah.
Can I share another video?
Oh, please, yeah,
I don't remember if I've shared this before.
yeah. Do you mean to screen share or just send me?
Yeah.
Okay, yeah. I want to quickly use a bathroom. Might be good to.
Is it sharing?
Yeah, it is sharing. I want to take a quick break and pee really quick.
Go for it.
I'll be back.
I'll press play and we'll leave.
Really? No, don't do that. Because I want to watch.
Do it.
Okay. Ugh. Chatting. Let's see. Okay, hey, you're there. Sorry. You want to start it over?
I just did.
Okay.
I don't think I'm sharing audio though.
There we go. Do you want to be?
No, it's okay.
Oh, okay.
I'll just have subtitles.
Hundreds of miners work inside an active volcano.
Sorry. one sec, dude. Sorry. Okay, now we're on stream. Okay. And this is a video of sulfur mines. Wow. Wow. $12 to $17 a day. Because their lives are so bad, they'll accept that. They need any amount of money. No one would do this if they didn't need money bad enough.
We don't have to keep going, but it's a horrifying, existence.
Yeah. Yeah.
Presumably that's better than whatever the alternative is, which is not having a job and then going hungry.
The alternative in our given system.
Is this our given system?
Yeah.
I mean, that's Indonesia, right? That's not.
This is our given system, and you could find stuff in the U.S. equally bad working conditions, for sure.
To walking up and down an active volcano, inhaling sulfur?
Yeah. I mean, you don't think there are situations where people are inhaling toxic fumes in the U.S. and in dangerous situations? It's not on a volcano, but it's not as sensational.
Not to that degree, no.
Oh, man. I mean, I don't have it like in front of me, but I would just have to assume there's definitely toxic working conditions in the U.S. chemical-wise and otherwise. I mean, but yeah, this is our system.
We have a legal system, though. You can sue for shit like that. They can't do that here.
You don't think... Wait, what? Sorry, you said we...
In the United States, if you're inhaling, if you're going to work every day and you're having to inhale poison gas, you can sue your employer.
Yeah, and I don't...
You have absolutely no legal recourse to do that in a volcano in Indonesia.
Yeah, I assume probably because the laws aren't as strict and there's... Yeah, the government hasn't instituted similar laws because they need these companies to exploit them so they have any money. Just like the workers do. I mean, but your point was, is this our system? And even regardless of whether the same working conditions exist in the U.S., it's our system because we use that sulfur. I mean, yeah. That goes into our stuff, I assume. And that's terrible. And it's been like that for hundreds of years and all across the world. And yeah, that's just what this system demands. Why do they only make $17 a day? Yeah, it's like, isn't that crazy to you? Like, they work so much harder than me. I'll say that much.
Yeah, that part's crazy to me. And I think it's worth having a conversation about it. It feels much more important to me to talk about something like that if we're even gonna with a serious face say something approximating reducing total human suffering, to talk about someone like not making as much as they should at Wendy's, in your opinion, as opposed to someone walking up and down an active volcano through poison gas. To me, it's like, it's not even... It feels wrong and fake to be talking about someone working a minimum wage job in the United States instead of talking about someone like this. Yeah, you're like, we should talk about both.
I don't get it, because if you have a friend that's like, hey man, I can't get this medical procedure I need because I don't have health insurance through my job and I don't have enough money to buy it off the messed up marketplace, and so I can't get this medical treatment I need. You're not going to be comparing that to, someone else suffering in another country. You're going to be comparing it to I wish they could get their medical needs met. So I just like we can compare it to worse things, but what's more important is comparing it to the possibility of things being better, and then judging
Fair enough.
how possible we think that is.
How would you make that guy's life better?
You would make it so like people don't have to pay anything to have access to healthcare. You would have like you would have a universal system where people pay some small amount of money, but maybe it's like very negligible. You just subsidize healthcare like you do other industries.
In Indonesia,
Sorry, you cut out slightly. Say that again.
in Indonesia, you would provide that universal healthcare?
I would. I mean, I would probably ask. Yeah, I would ask companies that have exploited a country to contribute to a fund for that country. But Indonesia might already have universal health. Yeah, I don't even know.
But the healthcare that you're describing, I'm assuming, involves things like an MRI or the
Yeah.
ability to do an X-ray.
Yeah, and I don't think the
or
U.S.
do
citizens.
surgery.
Yeah, yeah. I don't think U.S. citizens have obviously any more right to any of that than anyone else.
But the problem that I have with the healthcare as a right is that it involves the right to someone else's labor,
Yeah.
which you don't have.
But that's every right. We've talked about this before. Like your right to.
Rights from as opposed to rights to.
I mean, there's just different ways of phrasing. Like, because you could say your right to privacy is your right from being intruded on. And either way, that needs someone to enforce it.
No, but like a right to privacy, if you wanted to flip that as something else, would be like, I can send you to this island so that I can be alone. Like that would be the positive version of that as
No,
opposed
the
to the
positive
negative.
version would be you've intruded into my house and I'm calling the police and I have a right to their labor. I have
No. That's not a right to privacy.
So, wait, if I'm, you don't feel like that's enforcing the right to privacy if you say I'm, better example, because that's not privacy. That's not privacy. The idea of like a company spying on you, you know, like
Sure.
they already do, but let's say to an even worse extreme, that's illegal.
I don't see how, but okay.
Let's assume, you know, you have the right to the government stopping them.
No.
You don't.
You
think,
have a right to privacy.
yes.
The way that we currently choose to enforce that right
Yes.
is through government action,
Yes.
legal action.
Yes, obviously a right without enforcement is meaningless. So if you have the right to privacy and a company is violating your privacy, you have the right to someone else's labor in enforcing that right.
Yes.
Yeah.
Except you're paying for that labor at a wage that they agreed to.
And I think the same thing with it's not a wage they agreed to. I
But
mean,
whoever works for the government.
oh sure. Like they accept the wage when they take a job. They don't set the wage like out of their choice. Yeah. And that's the same. I mean, I think how do these other countries do universal health care? It doesn't
Yeah, but their healthcare is dog shit.
That's not true, man.
In Indonesia, what?
Oh,
you
I'm
think they
not. I
have
don't know
MRI
Indonesia.
machines?
I just talked to people. I've known people in Canada and people in the UK, and people don't complain that much about it, dude. Like there are obviously issues, and these are not even like the NHS in the UK has so many issues, but like people don't go back from universalizing their healthcare. It's a decision that seems to be a step in the right direction for every country.
I'm not saying that universal healthcare is worse than our current system. I think it would be a step up from our current system. I don't think it's the best, but I think it would be a step up.
Okay. Well, so I think that's enforcing the right to healthcare in a certain sense. Maybe it's not perfect, but you're saying I'm increasing access to something. Maybe we can't be sure that everyone's going to have perfect healthcare, but we could do our best to increase access to it.
So I don't see a right. This is something where I see very black and white. I don't see a right as like something on a spectrum from like I have none of it to I have some access to it to like it's fully enforced. A right to me is very much so a binary thing. You either have a right or you don't.
So what
And
is
I don't
something?
see it as like more. Yeah, go ahead.
Well, what's something like you feel like we have a right to, for instance?
Speech, freedom of speech.
Okay, freedom of speech. And you don't think there's a spectrum? Of course there is. You've told me about the laws you've read and the Supreme Court those, they look at the spectrum and they draw the line on the spectrum. No.
That's true.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's not an absolute right.
Yeah, so there's always I mean, I would say every single thing is a spectrum, so it's like an easy response. But yeah, I mean, you feel like that's different, or you feel like that's different from something like privacy or healthcare?
I'm not sure what I meant actually.
Yeah, because I just think that like there's always going to be the need for, like, you can't guarantee rights. I don't know. I think you can just try to guarantee them, and like it's like maybe lead a horse to water but can't make them drink. Like you could, yeah.
I guess what I if I could reiterate or rephrase what I meant to say, I don't believe in positive rights where you're guaranteed a right to something, because it usually involves stripping someone else of agency to provide you that right. I believe in rights from things where you have a right not to be infringed on by someone else.
You don't think
So in the example of speech, that would be I have a right from the government persecuting me for something I said.
right. And for me with unions, it would be like the right from your employer preventing you from having a union. But from the employer's perspective, they want the right to be free from the government telling them that they can't do that. So I just
Yeah, but corporations aren't people.
so what do you mean by that? Because
Corporations don't have rights. Human beings have rights.
but in our current system, corporations do have rights.
They have legal, I don't know, privileges, but they don't have rights.
Okay. Well, I guess I think like
I
don't
disagree with the Citizens United decision, by the way, which is the
Yeah.
landmark case saying that corporations have rights.
that makes sense.
For example, speech.
Yeah, and that makes sense. But you don't think freedom of speech is a positive right? You view it as a negative right because you're free from people infringing on your speech. You don't think it makes an equal amount of sense to say it's a positive right too?
I don't.
Okay.
No, I think it's an important logical distinction to say that it's a negative right.
You don't have the freedom to say whatever you want. You have the freedom to not be impinged on when you say whatever you want. And I guess and like, if someone violates my freedom of speech, like, let's say, what's a good example of someone violating my freedom of speech? Like
You say Donald Trump's horrible, and then the FBI knocks on your door the next day and says, hey, we're going to arrest you for treasonous statements.
okay. And then say I want to have my right enforced. I would take it to court, I guess. I would say the FBI,
Yeah.
but I am now drawing on the labor of people to enforce my right. Correct? I'm drawing on the court. I'm drawing on tons of people's labor to enforce my right.
I mean, that's not quite how we. I mean, so in this example, you're suing them, or you're
Yeah,
I
if
guess
I'm
defending yourself in a court.
if I feel that my right's been infringed, I guess I would just be defending my right. Let's say I was worried about it happening over and over, and I'm like wanting to.
So you're suing them, or they're trying to prosecute you, because they're different.
How is that different in terms of whether I'm entitled to other people's labor?
Because if they're suing, if they're trying to prosecute you for
Yeah.
a crime, that's the government deciding that they're going after you for something that you did.
Right.
Whereas if you're suing them, they're having to defend themselves from a claim that you made.
So you would
In
say
neither situation are you entitled to their labor.
So if I'm defending myself from the government and they're saying you no longer have the right to say what you want to say, and I'm saying I want to have the right, maybe I get a public defender, maybe there's a judge. You don't feel like those people are working ideally in a system to enforce my right. They're using their labor to enforce my right.
No, in the example of a public defender, yeah, that kind of tracks.
Yeah.
But again, that public defender accepted a wage to work that job. When I'm talking about entitlement to someone else's labor, I usually or probably always say that in the context of healthcare. I haven't fully fleshed out that idea of how it maps onto other aspects of our society.
Yeah.
But I guess I know it when I see it in healthcare. if in the example that we were talking about in Indonesia, you say that there's a right that someone is guaranteed or legally has to healthcare, and you've defined what healthcare includes, maybe it's access to a hospital, an emergency room, a surgeon, an MRI machine,
Yeah,
whatever. Like you'd have to come up with a good definition of what
sure.
healthcare entails. Well, what if you can't find people that want to perform that healthcare at the price you want to pay them? Do you get to force them as a government to do it?
No, I don't think that's necessary. I think it's a matter of like just like giving giving people a. I think you can pay people a fair amount for their labor, and still have a system where people's access to that labor is more free than it is now. I don't think it involves like I don't think a universal healthcare system involves paying healthcare practitioners less. I
Look at Medicaid.
I get paid the same amount, if not more, from Medicaid than I do from other insurance companies.
You do?
Yes,
The hospitals don't.
I don't.
Interestingly.
I have a slightly hard time believing that. I'm sure you've looked at some data, and I'd be open to looking at it. Okay, I shouldn't say that. I do agree that there's got to be some discrepancies for sure, and the way they're reimbursed for certain things. I don't know. I think what we're talking about now is incredibly complicated, and it's really hard to
It is.
it's hard to isolate a specific variable. Would Medicaid
Absolutely.
Is current Medicaid the same as universal health care? Would it reimburse it in the same ways? Would a certain amount of money be saved on the streamlining? It's just a huge efficiency thing, I think, to streamline into one single payer rather than all.
I agree, yeah,
Yeah.
for sure.
I mean,
Not as efficient as removing insurance entirely, but yeah, it would be better.
efficient for the purposes of still getting people's needs met. Because I think removing insurance would be more efficient, but not towards the goal of getting people's needs met. I think you would not get the same healthcare goals met.
Can I ask so let's say we went through passing legislation to get universal health care. That means, if I go into the doctor to say my lungs are feeling a little bit shitty, like, can you prescribe me something?
Yeah.
Like something's going on. I see a physician. I don't have to pay anything because I'm already paying a monthly premium just for existing.
Sure.
And the doctor says, we did an x-ray. You clearly have a ton of inflammation in your lungs. You told us that you smoke 3 packs a day.
Yeah.
This is why you have to stop smoking.
Yeah.
At this point, you should stop smoking.
Yeah.
But what if I don't want to? Does the government have a compelling interest to say you are going to jail if you don't stop smoking? Because you are causing everyone else to incur higher costs in the system, and we just told you can't smoke. Would that be reasonable?
I think, does the government have a slight interest for it? Yeah. Should the government work that way? Of course not. No, not in any way. Because people's freedom to make a decision like that is more important than the amount of cost that raises for other people. And this does...
Interesting.
Yeah, and this does...
Can I ask another one?
Yeah, sure.
I know these are hypotheticals,
No,
but
it's
this is
fine.
the other one
Yeah.
that gets people who don't like universal really itchy.
Sure, yeah.
I go into the doctor. Maybe I'm 80 years old. I
look great.
have... Say again?
You look great for 80 years old.
You think so?
Yeah, I was gonna say, yeah, you don't look a day over 70.
Appreciate it if you don't comment on my appearance. But anyway, so let's just so I'm 80 years old. I go into the doctor. I have some very unique form of brain cancer that I have a 99% chance of dying in the next few months.
Yeah.
But I have a 1% chance that I can live for a year if they operate today.
Yeah.
And the surgery is going to take 3 different surgeons with specialties. It's going to be very expensive, intensive, and I have a maybe 1% chance at another 9 months of life.
Yeah.
Under a universal system, I believe that surgery would be denied. That claim would be denied. They'd say the cost benefit here doesn't make sense. We can't afford to pay surgeons $1 million for this chance of you living a little bit longer.
Okay.
You can't get this. Sorry.
Okay.
How would that system deal with such a an example.
So are you supposing that a government makes decisions about those types of costs in a more severe way than a company? Because that currently happens
So,
all the time with people's insurance denying them all kinds of care.
but you could pay for it yourself.
But that's not reasonable. Like you know some of these situations it's like either
It's
yeah,
it's not practical
it's
for
not
most
free.
people
I
to
mean,
do
if
that.
we're
I
caring about
agree with that.
yeah, and if we're talking about human freedom, like that's not freedom. It's not freedom to say, "Hey, you can pay 20 grand for."
So
Dude, I broke an ankle. I think it was like 10 grand without like the financial assistance.
in that example, I know it sounds super unreasonable, and it is. This is the slippery slope argument that I think is a legitimate one, that $1 million surgery that gives you 9 more months becomes a $1,000 procedure that gives you a few more years of life. Or certain classes could potentially get discriminated against where others are not. Perhaps the government passes a law where women don't get the same kind of healthcare that men do,
Right.
or certain ethnicities don't get the same kind of healthcare that others do. You could very easily see this misused by the government.
You think the government is more likely to do something like discriminatory or unfair compared to a company?
I do. Yeah, and
Why?
I mean history definitely paves that very easily. I mean, I don't have to think very hard to think of examples where the government has done that.
I mean,
For example, Jim Crow laws.
for sure, but like aren't there so like wouldn't are there really more examples of the government behaving in unequal ways compared to
Oh.
corporations? Yeah, I don't draw a hard line between governments and corporations in terms of how they act and how they care about human well-being. I to me the big difference is a government is theoretically more responsive to the needs of the populace, not in actuality in a lot of cases because of how much power people have with money. But theoretically, that's to me the big difference. I very much shy away from thinking like governments are nicer or meaner or more good or bad than corporations. I definitely don't think they're more likely to do discriminatory things compared to corporations. But like your point, I guess I was
But
just trying.
my
Yeah,
argument is like they have a monopoly on violence. That's why I'm more scared of the government amassing that power than I am of corporations. Not that the government is somehow uniquely evil in a way that companies are not. They're just both run by people. But the government has
yeah.
a monopoly on violence that no one else has.
They do. And I think the problem that I see is like a lot of violence is already being done by corporations for example, for instance, a company denying someone health care, an insurance company saying, no, we're not reimbursing for that.
That's doing violence too.
I think that's causing harm, and I think that's doing violence. But my point is, like, I don't think the government should use their monopoly for violence for violence. I just trust that there is more ability for us to have influence on how our government acts than there is for us to have influence on a corporation acts. But that's not even like my main point. I guess I'm just trying to say like the example you're giving happens every single day, all so many times, and
Hmm.
we can look at an extreme example, and that's a valid question of like when do we reimburse for procedures, whether it's a insurance company or a government. I think
Hmm.
I think it's a fair question. I do think it would be up to the person and their family. I would never want the government. I don't want the government to make that decision. I don't want an insurance company to make that decision. I want it to be between people and their healthcare providers. And so I really would if someone and their family talking to their healthcare provider decided, yeah, I want that really expensive thing. I this does come back to like I think we live in a world where we can afford it. I don't think that means other people are going hungry if we are more deliberate about where we use our resources.
I'd be remiss not to talk about this topic and mention how I would like this landscape to look, where you could go into a physician's office for a problem you're having. They tell you it's going to be a $20 fee to see them. They offer to do this procedure, and it's going to cost you $300. Or you could do this procedure, it's going to cost you $1,000. What would you like to do? You tell them, you exchange money, they perform the medical procedure, and you go home. I would love to see something like that, where you actually know what you're paying for.
Fully agree, man. The only question is like, how does that work for someone with very, very little or no money? Because there are lots of people in that position. So how do they?
They won't get medical care. Full stop.
Yeah.
But the medical care will be cheaper for sure, and thus more people will have access to it than you may think based on current prices. But absolutely, some people will get left in the dust. I think it'll do more good on average than it does harm.
It's hard for me to believe that because there are so many people with so little. Like, you look at the percentage of Americans who can't afford a surprise bill. And it's like...
For sure.
So it's just hard for me to understand how much would costs go down versus how many people would suffer.
Can I vent to you for a second?
Yeah,
if
sure.
that's all right?
Yeah.
So I went to physical therapy a few months ago, just like a knee thing I was dealing with from a soccer injury.
Oh, yeah, I remember
and
that, man. Yeah.
They don't tell you the price when you go. They say they're in network. Okay, great. So it can't be that bad. Well, I recently changed plans through my employer to a higher deductible plan. I get this bill after a couple months. I find out I'm being charged $500 per session, per 45-minute session.
Are you fucking kidding me?
No, I'm not kidding. I'll show you the
No. $500 for each appointment.
It was $483 for a 45-minute session.
God, yeah.
So I looked at it like they break it down into 15-minute chunks, and they're like 125 for directed exercises, which was the physical therapist being like, you know what to do now, right? Go over there and do your squats and stuff. Okay.
Yeah.
Sometimes not even that,
Not
right?
fair.
So literally me going to a place, doing exercises I could do at home. $500 an hour. Talk to my insurance. They're like, well, it's a high deductible plan. We're covering only a portion of it. You're on the hook for like $250 an hour or something like that. Like, what the fuck? Like,
that's so bad.
Based on whatever I was being, like the service I was being provided from a healthcare perspective, that is nowhere fucking near that. That was like a $20 to $30 an hour free market would say service. Someone had to go to school to get some semblance of education.
Right.
Granted, the person I had was like, he was really phoning it in, like sitting in the back of his high school class, just cracking jokes kind of guy. It was a total farce and waste of money.
Yeah.
And everyone in that chain that I talked to, the people in billing, the physical therapist, the office, everyone sees it as normal. They're like, yeah, well, this is the negotiated rate that we have with that insurance company. And in reality, why it's $500 an hour is because the insurance company is recouping cost from me.
Yeah.
For everyone else that's using healthcare services and not paying anything.
That I do not think is true. I think they're
so why is it so high?
I think they're recouping costs, but it's not because of the other people utilizing their insurance. I think it's because of the administrative costs of the insurance company itself. I don't think their main cost... Okay, I don't know how it works out when you aggregate and look at their balance sheet or something. I think that the driver of costs is less of other people needing healthcare, and I think it's more of greed. And I also think it's... They're like, your insurance company is getting massive profits every year. Right.
I don't see them as insanely massive, but that's a surplus that they're taking from us.
From us.
For the service of providing insurance in the event that you have some sort of catastrophic healthcare moment where you need them to pay out $100,000 or something.
But yeah, the argument is like, yeah, you're paying for that, but is that where their profits come from? Or is that like, that's where their revenue comes from? But like, why?
So their profit is how much money they collected.
Yeah.
Minus all of their expenses,
all their costs, so
which are salaries.
Clearly, they're making
it's just salaries.
Well, and what they pay out, like what you're saying. So it's like clearly they're bringing in more than they're paying out. I think
they have to.
Yeah, it's a racket. I mean, like it's a
By
racket.
definition, insurance is a
A
racket.
huge racket. And the fact that you're like,
I'm glad we agree on that.
Yeah,
Mathematically, it's a racket.
but the
It's
thing is,
the whole yeah, sorry,
your
go ahead.
physical therapist needs to get paid. And even if it's like, I agree that $30, I'm a therapist for anyone watching in the future. I do not want my clients to pay more than $30 an appointment. And some of them do. And it's annoying because if they have a high deductible, it'll charge fully to them. I'll tell you what I do, dude, and I'm not joking and I'm not saying this to be nice. I charge a bunch of clients a lower fee after insurance. So it'll process to their deductible and I'm like, okay, I cannot ask this person to pay me $100, which is like what the insurance will allow. I'm like, I just can't have this person pay me $100. I can't because of what you're saying. Like, it just doesn't feel like the right amount. It's just, in our day and age, if someone's rich, sure, but most of my clients are just relatively, normal people. They cannot pay $200, $400 a month for mental health therapy. So I charge $50 or something. I've accepted $20. That's not ideal though. And I can't do that with all my clients. It would be impossible. So obviously your physical therapist, assuming he didn't suck, if a good physical therapist, they deserve to get paid. So it's like, how does that work that you pay a reasonable fee that's much lower and they get a reasonable fee that's much higher? Seriously, how is that supposed to work from your perspective?
How would it work?
Yeah.
Check this out. I walk up to the physical therapy store.
Yeah.
I walk in, I say, how much is it per hour for a session? And they say, well, our services are $40
And you go
an
find
hour.
another place.
Would you like a session? Yes, please.
Yeah.
Here is $40.
Yeah.
Could you fucking fathom
So
what that would be like? Regulators, in my opinion, are the first people to point the finger at, because the fact that it's a regulated thing that goes through insurance it is unnecessary.
Yeah.
A consumer should have the freedom to choose to purchase that service.
Yeah, and regulator, I'm not sure I know exactly what you mean, because there's all different types of regulation, but so what you're describing, I think there are probably a lot of good examples that if I was smarter, I could bring them up. I feel like there are a lot of like attempts at this sort of enterprise. I feel like I remember learning about like a dialysis sort of company that well, regardless. Okay, so you do that and then they get a lot of clients. And so this one place gets tons of clients and so they can accept a much lower fee. I don't really get how that works for how they pay their workers. Like, I don't get how they get paid enough, even if they have tons of clients. Because I
don't understand what you're describing.
Well, they still need to scale their employees with their clients. So how do they... I mean, unless you're talking about a physical therapist working with like 10 of you at the same time, that seems like that's what you're talking about. I don't understand how are they supposed to accept so much less?
I'm not following you. Could you try to say it again?
How could that business that accepts $40 for physical therapy? You're saying this system would work because at the end of the day, the competition would lead to one business being able to offer that affordable fee. But my point is, you're missing that other piece of how do they make sure they're also paying their workers a sufficient amount, which is the gap that insurance bridges. So how does a company like that scale or not scale or just exist, providing the service at the fee you're talking about without insurance and pay their workers a reasonable, any reasonable?
Sorry, you're asking me how would the workers still be able to make enough money or as much money? So why wouldn't the workers just work at the big inflated insurance?
Well, how would it work? Because the one charging more doesn't get as many customers. And so all the customers go to the one that's like what we agree that these things should cost. And how does that company provide it at that low fee? How does it do it? How does that company provide it at that low fee?
I don't think that's a hard question to answer.
Help me understand.
The same way that like when you go to a massage therapist, they tell you how much it's going to cost, you pay them the money, and they massage you.
Right. So, but what I'm saying is like, massages are like $80, and if you want to go get a $20 massage, you're going to a place where the people are paid much less, correct?
They're children usually, but yeah.
Right. And they're not licensed, and they
Yeah.
might not know how to, they might hurt you. They might physically hurt you. And you, like, so how does a physical therapist, how do you make sure insurance bridges an important gap? And I'm just not seeing how you reckon with that in what you're talking about.
I don't think it's bridging that important of a gap. I would rather take the chance that there's a harm from those people and rely on word of mouth, social media, reviews to say, fuck these people, don't go there, they're awful.
Yeah.
And let people just express their preferences by voting with their dollars. I'd much, much rather that.
You do deal with stuff like one business undercutting other businesses for a certain amount of time, putting that other business out of business, now having a monopoly on the area. I mean, there are all these other forces that come into play that make it less of a free system than you're imagining, where people are now less free to choose where they want to go, and they're ending up at the unregulated place with no,
It's
assurance
true.
that they're getting.
You are talking about a monopoly, which is, I think, maybe not quite relevant to this particular industry, but is a relevant conversation in general.
Right.
I'd say like Amazon doing that as a tactic to try to put smaller stores out of business, and then they can jack up prices later.
Yeah.
But I would argue that you should focus instead on removing barriers to entry for new entrants. So if I want to tomorrow open a physical therapy practice, the barrier to entry to doing that should be as close to zero as possible, so that if there is ever a company out there price gouging or cornering the market, there's always the opportunity for a new entrant to do it without having to go through extreme hurdles that prevent them from wanting to.
Yeah. I don't think there should be excessive barriers to people starting an enterprise I think the barriers to entry that currently exist are you have to turn a profit. And I think that that's a huge barrier to people providing quality care. I think some fields are not the right one for profit. And so I guess that comes down to a little bit of what we're talking about. I don't know that there's a way to get profit in an ethical way.
So we should operate as a society, we should operate certain services at a loss, is what you're saying.
Yes. And the mail being a really good example.
I mean, food is kind of one of them.
Yeah, but the mail's been one that they've been trying to operate at a profit for years now. And
they don't. It's a few billion a year, yeah.
Ruined it's like really fucked with the mail system, I feel like.
Is that true?
Yeah, I think it's really like
they haven't made it more profitable.
It hasn't made it more profitable, but I think it's underfunded in a significant way. And I don't want to speculate, but I think there's always pushes to like fund it less. And I know Trump was pushing that a lot too, specifically with the mail-in voting and everything like that.
Of all of the things that like we need as a society, is mail really that core to like?
Honestly, maybe it is, but I was just thinking
email. I mean, is it that important to be able to send someone a physical thing at a very low cost? Because like FedEx and UPS exist and they're slightly more expensive.
Yeah. I mean, they don't go everywhere. There are places they do not go, like significant areas that they do not go because it's not profitable. So that's the problem. That's what I've learned. Like I remember reading this specific thing.
Sure.
Yeah. So it's like that is the more free you let capitalism be, the less free people are to like get mail. Like, they're like, it's like now someone loses that freedom. And I think that's an important freedom. Not that it's
not
right.
a freedom though, right? It's a service.
I think it's
not like getting mail isn't a right.
It's
not a human right.
No,
it's nice. It's a
that's
convenience.
what I'm saying. But it makes your life more free. Like it makes your life better and more able to do things. So I just like, that's something to prioritize. Letting people be able to start businesses without excessive regulation. I don't necessarily disagree with that. I think there are some regulations that are good and there's some gatekeeping that's good in certain industries, but
sorry.
I don't really.
We do what you said, like operating at a loss to some degree. Anywhere that we do subsidies is that.
Yeah.
And we're doing it in a massive way with quote green energy. Government subsidies, for example, electric cars.
Yeah, that's a great example. Yeah.
But food, right? We'll subsidize food production and even ask corn farmers or just agriculture in general to leave certain plots of land empty, unfarmed, and
yeah.
pay them to not farm them for fear that oversupply would drop the price of food, causing farmers in the next season to grow too little of that crop and potentially having not enough food of that one particular food, like a core supply.
Yeah.
It's the way to basically manufacture no famine,
Sure.
or that's the idea, like security against that. You can agree with it or disagree with it. At the moment, I think it's more of an electoral tool than anything else, not a truly a stabilizing the food supply thing. The farming vote is a huge electoral body, and so getting those farming subsidies, I think, is, like I said, an electoral tool.
Yeah.
But it's an interesting question to ask where we should point the government purse for a greater societal good.
Yeah.
I think it's a power that we should use extremely sparingly and with the cautionary principle.
I just feel like it's being. I agree. I just feel like there's never a chance of using it more or less. It feels like it's always being used an enormous amount. It's the government is always doing so much. It's being forced. It's forcing so many things to happen. So maybe it's possible to do more or less, but I feel like it's just, where do we point it?
Well, you and I can agree, I guess, on some aspects of that. Would you at least acknowledge that perhaps you're warmer to the idea of pointing the government resources in a direction that you choose just because it's a direction that you like, and you perhaps are minimizing the probability that the government would at some point turn that in a direction you don't like? The example I tried to give to a lot of people during Trump's presidency, I don't think it worked. There's a not insignificant portion of people that were like, Trump's a Nazi, fascist, gonna turn our country into a, I don't know, repressive religious dictatorship or something. So I tried to make that argument. Okay, if you feel that way, wouldn't you want to strip the federal government of as much power as possible so that if someone like Trump gets elected, he is cut off at the knees and doesn't have the power to enact that kind of thing? I make that argument that I don't want the left to have that power. I don't want the right to have that power, because at some point, someone's going to misuse it.
I get where you're coming from. I just think that's more theoretical than practical, because I
think it's historical.
So you feel like there are historical periods where the power of the government has been decreased substantially?
I would say the revolution, probably. Like 1776, like breaking off from England, moving away from a tyranny. Yeah,
I really don't know, and I don't.
And it was too weak under the Articles of Confederation, and that's why they reformed in '87 to make the Constitution as we know it.
Yeah, I guess. Yeah, I wish I knew more about this. I guess, I mean, I definitely understand the argument. Like, you don't want to, like, I wouldn't want to, like, say, let's make executive orders, they can never be overturned. You know what I mean? Something like that would be so foolish. Obviously, for the reason you're saying. I want Obama to do all the executive. Well, it's going to be someone else next time. I think giving the government the power to do certain things that are specific and well-defined and can't just be overturned to something else can be useful. And obviously lines.
As long as it's something you like.
Yeah. I mean, of course.
What if it's something you don't like?
But when I talk about politics, I'm not trying to talk about what I personally like. I'm trying to talk about what I like in this realm of politics is that I want most people to benefit as much as possible. So anything I say that's wrong, I'm trying to be wrong in the sense of, like, I'm wrong that would help most people, but I'm at least going about it in that way where I'm saying, like, it's not that I want the government to, like, invest in, like, experimental music and, like, video essays, I wanted to, invest in, like, food, like stuff that I'm pretty sure other people are into.
I think I should probably go.
Yeah, shortly. We've been talking so long. This has been a great chat, man.
I've enjoyed it too.
I
I don't know if we really figured anything out.
I don't
but
think
I enjoyed
I
it.
don't think we should try to make that the goal. I think it's just that, I think to have a good time, and I definitely think we had a really entertaining chat and maybe budged each other a little bit here and there, but mostly just like I definitely think that was a really good chat, and I'm just happy to go through all this stuff. It's fun. And
I'm gonna go listen to an audiobook of Ayn Rand's maybe Fountainhead to try to cleanse myself of these Marxist notions.
I was gonna make a joke that you took the words out of my mouth. I'm gonna do the same thing, but your joke was even funnier. But yeah, no, this was great. Let's definitely, yeah, I'm gonna read Capital.
Isn't it Capital?
I think that would just be the German. But yeah, I've been reading it a lot, and yeah, it's really, really interesting, man. Honestly, if you're ever like super bored, it's like not what you would expect. I don't know if you've ever read through it. Like it's like really not what you would expect.
In what way?
Like,
no, I've never read it.
It's a systematic, philosophical exploration of why profit works the way it does. It's just super methodological and careful, and you would still disagree with certain things and stuff like that, I'm sure, but like it just tries to go about it in a very objective way while also having a ton of personality. And like Karl Marx was like a total like he just like tears people apart and is like a total dick to all these other thinkers and stuff. So it is kind of entertaining at the same time. But no, it's one of the most interesting just like philosophical things I've read, because it's very philosophical but very like practical, and he'll go into these specific details of like this many number of people working in the wool industry in 1855. It's just like, I can definitely recommend it where like, yeah, it's obviously biased, but it's like an objective. It feels very objective when you're reading it. It's super interesting. That's all I would say is like, I'm reading it and I'm like, well, definitely have not read anything like this. So yeah, if you're ever really bored, I would definitely write. Capital is like the one that really breaks it down, I would say. But yeah, I mean, it's just a critique of capitalism, and people disagree. But hey, this was really fun though, and yeah, we'll both go on with our days in our own ways.
Totally fine.
Great talking with you, man. And yeah,
you too.